one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 2nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 3 degrees, Smiths Falls 4. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ramping up the rollout of booster shots in the face of Omicron. There's word the province is about to lower the age of eligibility for a third dose of COVID-19 vaccine amid climbing case numbers and this troubling new variant. With the latest, here's City News reporter Kevin Meisner.
Ontario plans to expand the rollout of booster shots to people 50 and over, with the first shots going into arms by the middle of this month. We will get the official announcement at 2 this afternoon when Chief Medical Officer of Health Dr. Kieran Moore provides his weekly COVID update. City News 680 will carry it live. Right now, booster shots are limited to people over 70 in Ontario, in high-risk groups, Indigenous communities, and those given 2 shots of AstraZeneca. Now, Pfizer Vice President Rolf Reinhardt says Omicron is not fully understood at this point, but the value of a booster shot is still key in increasing your immune response.
You also increase the breadth of coverage. That means when you booster, you get a better protection against new variants. That's certainly something we will also observe with Omicron.
Now, lowering the age to 50 here in Ontario would add another 4 million arms to the current vaccination effort, one which has slowed down with regard to adults but is ramping up when it comes to younger school-age children. However, the federal government is insisting that supply of vaccine will not be a problem across the country. At Queen's Park, Kevin Meisner, City News.
Now, pop-up vaccination clinics are starting today for COVID vaccine in children between the ages of 5 and 11. This is in addition to community clinics. Now, Ottawa Public Health is operating these on a rotating basis at area schools. It will start at 2 schools. These are for students between the ages of 5 and 11, plus anyone who lives in that school neighborhood. These drop-in clinics today are at Dr. F.J. MacDonald Catholic School and Marius Barbeau. Now, the City Health Department says so far there have been over 8,400 5 to 11-year-olds who have received their first vaccination. American President Joe Biden taking action, trying to slow the spread of this new COVID variant with tighter rules for Canadians and, in fact, all foreign visitors who arrive in their country by air. Airline passengers must get a COVID-19 test no later than the day before they depart. For now, the rules aren't changing for Canadians driving across the border. Canada does require all travelers except Americans flying into Canada to be tested upon arrival and also self-isolate while they wait for the results. City News Time 9:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Well, our unsettled weather continues. We'll have cloudy conditions, some rain mixing with snow at times, and then all rain for the afternoon. Milder air working in, a gusty wind out of the southwest. The high 6 degrees. Tonight, light rain ending early in the evening, the mainly cloudy, and a low near -6. Tomorrow, sun, cloud, colder, and about -4. For today, the high +6.
And right now, 3 degrees in Ottawa, 4 degrees in Smiths Falls. The city clerk is recommending city council and committees continue meeting with a hybrid model into the new year now. The final council meeting to approve the upcoming year's budget will be held next Wednesday, but there are still committee meetings scheduled for December. Rick O'Connor suggests, after consultation with Ottawa Public Health, the hybrid model be used for December and likely into the start of the new year. The first session for council in the new year is January 26. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Inform your opinion.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Ottawa. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off today and tomorrow. Was off yesterday. Derick Fage here. Host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in. Oh my goodness, do we have lots to talk about. This is going to be an exciting show. David has been working furiously all morning long. My goodness. I'd like to say I have been as well. Let's just start off by saying this. Okay, sports fans, the Ottawa Senators are a terrible team. I mean, they are absolutely terrible. Apologies to my wife, who's probably listening right now, because she's always like, listen, don't be so down on them. I don't want you to get me down on the team. This is a tire fire. David, it's
just a tough time.
It's not just a tough time. David, this is the worst team in the entire NHL. They're worse than last year. This team, and I don't think it's just because, listen, this defense core looks terrible. There's something with the coaching staff here. I like DJ Smith as a person, but he's lost the room. I don't know what's going on. These guys can't play defense. They can't stop the puck. Matt Murray is obviously not the entire problem here. You know, they sent Matt Murray, waived him, and he cleared waivers, and now he's down playing in Belleville. He'll be playing his first game, I think, on Saturday. But boy, oh boy, this is just a terrible hockey team.
Worst in the league, and by a margin, too. I mean, they got spanked by the second worst team in the league last night. 6-2.
Pretty much, yeah. 6-2 loss. So someone's got to first. Everyone's clamoring. I mean, you look at Sen's Twitter; they're clamoring for somebody like Pierre Maguire. Where are you? Where Pierre Dorian? Like, somebody say something. DJ Smith has to go up in front of the press after each terrible game.
They're gonna need a fall guy.
Yeah, I can be that guy. You know, I can use the work, and I've got big shoulders. You know. Just throw me out there and I'll come up with answers. No, I probably don't have answers if DJ Smith doesn't. All right, lots to talk about here, David. Okay, let's first, Omicron. You just heard in the news, reports saying, of course, Ontario going to announce lowering the eligible age for a third COVID-19 vaccine dose to 50. Currently, eligibility for third doses are limited to individuals 70 and over. Healthcare workers and designated essential caregivers in congregate settings, individuals who received a complete series of a viral vector vaccine, that means 2 doses of the AstraZeneca or 1 dose of the Janssen vaccine, and First Nation, Inuit, and Métis adults and their non-Indigenous household members. But the reports this morning say Health Minister Christine Elliott will announce today that the eligibility will be expanded, as I mentioned off the top. In other Omicron news, the world scientific community is still in the process of figuring out exactly what this variant is and how serious it could be, which is producing a ton of, guess what? I know it's surprising, contradicting news coverage that's very confusing to try to keep track of. If you tuned in this morning looking for some definitive answers on how serious this new variant is, on behalf of David, myself, scientists around the world, everybody here at City News, I'm sorry, we got nothing for you.
We don't know yet.
We don't.
We're doing our best, but it's tough.
Oh, my goodness. So let's talk about some things that are happening. Okay, the WHO continues to advise against restricting travel in response to the new variant.
And that's going very well. Lots of people listening to that advice.
I mean, there's so much. The National Post, David, I have to share this headline. Can I share this with the good viewer?
This sums it up.
Here it is. This is front page, by the way. Just going to hold this up for you viewing on Rogers TV. This is the front page. And if you can't read it very well, let me read it for you. Okay? Omicron stokes concern and a cautious hope. This is the headline. As dream scenario of a weaker COVID-19 variant tantalizes. Scientists insist we really have zero idea. I'm not sure I would have gone down this route of saying scientists really have zero idea. This is coming from, by the way, the University of British Columbia's evolutionary biologist, Sarah Otto. She says, for the unvaccinated, mild COVID could train the immune system much like vaccines. For the vaccinated, it would be like a natural booster. I dare not even hope. Hope isn't science. And you know, and speaking of contradictory, so you go to the next page, and you know there's no hope, and you just heard about it. While Omicron has a jumble of mutations in the spike protein, there's still a lot of spike that's not changed, and our immune reaction should recognize other parts well if we've been vaccinated. But, this is the confusing part, but it will spread like wildfire among the unvaccinated. I just don't know what to do anymore, David. I'm at a loss. It's just so confusing.
All right, let's take a step back here and let's review what we do know.
Okay.
Calm me down. It could be more infectious than Delta, or it could not be. Vaccines could work well against it, or they could not.
All right, okay.
It could become the new dominant strain, or it could not. And it may cause more severe illness, or it could not.
Right. So we've cleared that up for the listener.
That's all clear.
Okay, thank you, David.
We can move along.
Yeah, all right. By the way, health officials say the new coronavirus variant Omicron has now become the dominant one in South Africa and is driving up a sharp increase in new infections. As a matter of fact, later on in the show, we are going to be speaking to Geoffrey York. He is the Africa correspondent for the Globe and Mail. He is based in Johannesburg. So we'll get the latest on Omicron in South Africa, but we can certainly share some of the information that we have right now when it comes to what's happening. So over 8,500 new COVID infections registered in the latest daily figures, almost double the 4,300 cases confirmed the previous day. And by the way, getting numbers out of South Africa isn't exactly easy. So these numbers could be a quarter of what's actually happening. So what's reported and what's happening are very different. Cases increased from a weekly average of 300 2 weeks ago to 1,000 per day last week. On Wednesday, the country recorded 8,561 cases. The government is now considering vaccine mandates to try and control the spread.
Might be a little late for that.
This is the confusion.
Yeah.
Where are the mandates? I just don't understand. 36% of adults in South Africa, they say, are now fully vaccinated. There are no shortage of vaccines in the country. We talked about that yesterday. There doesn't seem to be any shortage. The president is urging more people to get jabbed, saying, of course, this remains the best way. But how do you get it into people? The hesitancy is an issue. So we'll certainly talk about that later on in the show. What else have we got? Auditor General. We've got Ontario's Auditor General on the show today. A lot of interesting, I guess we could call them. David went through them yesterday with us. Some interesting finding. The Auditor General finds the Ford government overspent on COVID-19 business relief grants by almost $1 billion. Yeah, you heard me correct. $1 billion, and won't try to recover $210 million that went to ineligible businesses. Maybe that's something you want to talk about during the talkback hour. That's your hour, 10 o'clock. The city is doubling how much money it spends on repaving roads next year by taking out, not going into the reserve fund, by the way, which is quite considerable. And as David pointed out during our discussions before the show, isn't that what reserve funds are for? Like when you come up with a situation where things need to be done. I mean, we've seen main arteries being repaved like crazy across, and they have to be done because there's infrastructure beneath the roads that had to be replaced. You might as well do the rest of it. But there's all the side street. There's some horrible roads in this city, and now we're taking out a loan. Yesterday, the Transportation Committee approved its 2022 draft budget with a big boost to funds for fixing Ottawa's crumbling roads. The budget calls for issuing $39 million in debt to cover additional resurfacing operations with a new focus on residential streets in addition to major arterial roads. Fun fact, the city manages over 6,000 kilometers of roadways. We've got a big task ahead of us when it comes to repaving our roads.
I mean, it's about time. The roads are terrible. They've been terrible for several years now. That's not a secret. Any city councilor you speak to will tell you that's like the number one complaint they get in almost any ward other than in the downtown.
And we're not alone. I worked in Montreal for 4 years. You want to see some bad roads, buddy? My goodness. The potholes will swallow you there.
I contend Ottawa's almost on par with Montreal. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. It's a controversial opinion. I think Ottawa's just as bad as Montreal.
Not just as bad, but it's probably because the population difference, right? You have to take into consideration the size. Probably per capita, if you look at it that way, or per road capita, per kilometer capita, it's probably equal. No, you may be onto something there, David.
I know I'm onto something. That's why I'm saying
We'll see. Finally, this is going to be a fun one. We want you to call in during the talkback hour to talk about this one, okay? Finally, should teenagers be able to vote? I'm not talking the 18-19. We're talking the 16-17. Story making rounds earlier this week and has picked up some steam. A group of Canadian teenagers has filed an application at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice arguing that the section of the Canada Elections Act, which bars Canadians under 18 from voting in federal elections, is unconstitutional. The group is making the argument that the rule violates two sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 3, which states that every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election for members of the House of Commons or a legislative assembly, and Section 15, which states that every individual is equal before and under the law. Why just 16 and 17 then? I mean, just let anyone vote. Even if you're not paying taxes, what the heck? Why not? Let your 5-year-old vote. They have opinions. Do we want to hear from you on this one? Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
If you can hold the pencil, you can vote.
I mean,
what do you mean a 5-year-old? Nobody's
David,
saying 5-year-olds should vote. Okay, this is 16 and up.
Hold on, David. Can I please read Section 3 again of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which states that every citizen, did you hear me correctly? Every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election for members of the House of Commons or a legislative assembly.
That's why this is so stupid. We'll get into more of it later. Because, they're saying, well, every citizen should be able to vote. It's right there in the Charter.
Right, there it is.
You think every citizen? No, we just think 16 and up. 16 and up, it's good. That's good for us.
Okay, fine. And I wonder, would the 16 and 17 age group also agree that they should be treated as adults if they commit a crime, right? I mean, where does it stop, David? Okay, we've got lots to talk about. Don't forget, the 10 o'clock hour is your hour. 10 to 11 o'clock, you get a full hour to share your opinion. I think this is going to be a good one to talk about. Should teenagers be able to vote in the 16 to 17 age group? And by the way, this isn't a first. There's some other countries doing it, and we'll refer to those. We can talk about some of the other countries that are doing it during that talkback hour. Write this number down, 750-1310. Coming up after the break, Randall Denley, author and Ottawa Citizen columnist, will be talking about his latest column about the Police Services Board, and we'll have a look at the Ottawa Police Services budget and what Randall's opinion, and he has strong opinions, and I tend to agree with a lot of Randall's opinions. We'll be back with that after this. This is Derick Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on City News and Rogers TV.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned, we have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. At that time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise. And people, and for us, we have to be careful, especially with the virus going on. Did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. Earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just it will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, you know? And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online, let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at a certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off today. Derick Fage here filling in. And always a pleasure having our next guest on the show, Randall Denley, author and Ottawa Citizen columnist, joining us. Randall, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Derick.
I'm fired up. I read your article. I love the article. We'll talk about your latest article you're working on in the National Post in just a moment as well. But this latest article with the headline, Squeezing Ottawa's Police Budget Accomplishes Nothing. And, you know, it's for those people that are on board with trying to squeeze it and putting a freeze on, I think you should read this article because I think you come up with a lot of excellent points. Let's first of all talk about, so in response of this freeze, they decided to cut $2.65 million from the additional $14 million, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, Randall, but of course, you know, every little bit counts, right?
Yeah, when you look at the figures behind their budget, Derick, they say just to keep doing what they're doing, paying the salary increases, inflation, it's going to add $14.7 million. So we're talking about less than that. And the chief has said to the board, well, look, I'll find $5 million in efficiencies of some sort.
Right.
Maybe you will and maybe you won't, but it's a significant amount of money. And somehow that doesn't count. And the only reason we've ended up with this oddball $2.65 million number is because the people on the board said, well, 2%. Yeah, we'll give you a 2% increase in your budget. It's an odd thing when you consider that the city budget overall, they're increasing taxes 3%.
Right, and you know, I think another excellent point you make, that there's this talk of creating some kind of, I guess, non-police response to things like addiction and mental health. And as you say, that is a wonderful idea. I think it is a great idea. Perhaps the police aren't well trained in those kinds of things. However, where is it in if there are three counselors looking into this and are on board with doing so, where is it in the budget? I mean, if you're going to propose some kind of solution, then you should be putting something in place. If you're going to take it away from the police, why don't we begin setting something up? Why isn't this part of the plan? There's no actual plan here, right?
Yeah, and I should have said that increase. There is no plan, Derick. That is a big problem here. There's just a notion. There isn't even a motion for a plan yet. So even if they had a plan, it's certainly going to take at least the next budget year to really get this thing solidified, up and running. How's it actually going to work? And to me, the biggest practical impediment is somebody phones 911. Oh, I've got a crisis. There's a person here. They're acting out. They're upset. And is it related to mental health or addiction? Okay, well, we'll send a civilian team.
Right.
Well, what if a person has a knife? Or what if you don't know? You show up. We're going to have a big problem on the day the social worker shows up at somebody's door and they find out there's a knife-wielding person there, but the police didn't respond. It's not a simple thing to do.
Yeah.
It's going to take time. So why take money from the police budget in the coming year that you're not going to spend actually doing this? If it's a great idea, let the city spend some of its main budget money to say, yeah, we think this would be great. We're going to set it up, figure it all out, and then we're going to come back next year and say, we know how it's going to work. We worked with the police on this, and we've got an idea of what it might mean to reducing their calls so we can reduce their budget ask a little bit maybe to cover that off. But somehow there's an assumption that, well, this will reduce the police workload. So we'll just kind of build that in, even though there is no actual program. I think what we're really seeing here, Derick, is a different twist on the defund the police argument, which is, I think, seen as extreme by most people. So the people championing this change are saying, well, it's about finding efficiency and controlling spending, bending the cost curve, all the sorts of things that, people might say if they were fiscal conservatives, of which there are basically none on city council. And they're not applying the same thing to their own budget. There's a 3% tax increase. They're looking at that and thinking, wow, that's a job well done.
Yeah.
And the mayor said that keeping it to 3% would help make owning a home more affordable for people. I'm not sure how increasing taxes makes things more affordable, but
yeah,
I guess it could have been worse. Maybe that was
that's the way they always think. Just imagine it could be worse if we if we followed inflation. This thing could be worse. And sorting those calls, I think, is such an excellent point you make, and I think a lot more people need to think about that. And as part of this plan, those that are proposing this plan need to put a heck of a lot more thought into that, because that's going to be a difficult issue. What are you working on for the National Post?
Taking a look at this Auditor General report from yesterday, Derick, it's interesting, but I think the big headline thing is, oh my God, in rushing pandemic money out the door, some of it went to businesses that weren't actually eligible.
Right.
And the way the auditor sees the world, I guess the way auditors see the world in general is, well, there should have been clear parameters for what this program was to accomplish, and there should have been, detailed vetting of who was getting what and so forth. Okay, but what it was supposed to accomplish was pretty straightforward. It was to send a message that we're going to offer some kind of help to business. We know you're suffering. We shut you down. You're hurting. You're going to get checks. Mission accomplished. And,
right.
Unfortunately, some people in a program like that, and we saw it federally too, will put their hand out and say, well, I don't know if I qualify, but I'm going to ask. And if they say yes, it's money.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to try, right?
Yeah, and this main program, we're talking of grants of $10,000 and $20,000. So it's not big money. I mean, how much effort is it worth putting into this to think, well, now, just wait a minute here. Before we give you this $10,000, we're really going to start going through your books. It's just is not enough money to justify that. It adds up to a reasonably large sum of money in total. But
well, for sure, and to roll something out like that so quickly, you make an excellent point. Things are going to fall through the crack, and I'm not saying $210 million is a heck of a lot of money. But the province just doesn't have the resources, I don't think, to try to go back and recover this and fight small businesses to get money back. It just wouldn't make any sense.
And politically, it's a complete non-starter. I mean, it's what Andrea Horvath says. Oh, we have a list. We should go after these people because the word business is in there. Of course, she thinks, well, we have to get them, right? But these are little people that run small businesses. They're not major corporations.
Yeah.
You imagine what it would look like now. I mean, businesses are still suffering, generally, many, many of them. Oh, yeah, the government gave you $10,000, but we decided afterwards you didn't need it, we want it back. Oh, well, I don't have it now. Well, you better go get it,
Or here it is, and now I have to close my business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could get pretty ugly. Randall, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
All right, take care. By the way, a reminder that later on in the show, in the 11 o'clock, at exactly 11 o'clock, or just after the 11 o'clock news, Bonnie Lysyk, Ontario Auditor General, will be joining us. So we'll break down some of these findings with the Auditor General herself. Don't go away. Lots more coming up here on City News and Rogers TV. It's the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage filling in.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 2nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, raining and 3 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 4. Here's what's making news this hour. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, we're expecting the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health to announce an expanded booster shot campaign for the COVID vaccine. Dr. Kieran Moore expected to announce that those 50 and older will be able to get a third shot of the vaccine 163 days after their second. It's not clear how quickly Canadian airports will be able to start testing passengers arriving from countries other than the States for COVID-19. The feds ordered this new measure yesterday, or Tuesday, trying to catch cases of this new Omicron variant. But some airports may take some time to get up to speed with that testing requirement. Legislation to ban conversion therapy for LGBTQ Canadians now moves to the Senate. Yesterday, cheers and cross-party hugs as MPs unanimously adopted Conservative Justice critic Rob Moore's motion to fast-track passage of the Liberal government bill. Justice Minister David Lametti thanked members of the Conservative caucus who he said exercised a great deal of leadership on that issue. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here filling in for Rob for the rest of the week. It is time again for Ontario politics this week, and as usual, we are joined by Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Dalton McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Derick.
And Andrew Brander, senior consultant with Crestview Strategy and former advisor to the Ford government. Good morning, Andrew. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Glad to be here with you again.
Oh, it's exciting times. It's exciting. I saw Lindsay on Twitter, describing and discussing how we're only 6 months until the Ontario election. Oh, my goodness. You two must be so excited. I know I am. Oh, we've got a municipal election at the same time. This is good stuff, especially for those of
season.
'Tis the season, exactly. So let's talk about this. What do you think is going to be the key ballot issue, or perhaps even issues, are going to be as we get closer and closer to election time? I'll start with you, Lindsay.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch how this might shift depending on variants and what's happening with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because if it was right now, I do think this is about how did we do through this? Are people further behind or ahead of that sense that people feel that some got ahead and some didn't, and that divide got bigger, so that those key pocketbook issues and the little things that make lives better for Ontarians would be the really big items in an election like this. But if we are going to still potentially be in an election in a time that's going to be about management and, staying on a safe track and sort of that fear of change and the unknown, those elections usually do bode quite well for a sitting government. So it kind of is a difficult thing to forecast. My answer would have been different last week, right? In terms of,
true.
With the variant and the change, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about, vaccine equity and all of these issues that we weren't talking enough about even 6 months ago, which is why we're in this position. So the temperature of voters is going to be very much aligned with how we're dealing with the pandemic still 6 months from now. But I do think that one of the things, and we see this particularly with the Auditor's report, is this divide of those that got ahead and those that fell further behind in the last 2 years. And that is going to help really define some of these pocketbook issues that we're going to be talking about during an election.
Yeah, Andrew, I think that Lindsay makes a great point, because you do have, I think you have the have and the have-nots, and I know that you've got Premier Doug Ford who talks about the friends and folks, and he's trying to be one of the people, but I think there's another side of him that is very much in support of business and has the ear of many very wealthy business people. What do you think this is going to come down to? Obviously, the pandemic's going to be a big part of all of this.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what Lindsay said. But I think, look, in terms of what the different leaders are going to try to focus on are gonna vary, obviously, depending on who you're talking to. For the PCs, they are going to be wanting to talk about the path forward. They're going to want to be focused on, building stuff, if you will. What we saw in the fall economic statement, the 3 H's: highways, hospitals, high-speed internet. Their ads already pointing to them saying, we are the party that says yes. What they don't want to be talking about is the pandemic management. They don't want to be talking about lockdowns. At times, they don't want to be talking about their mismanagement, incoherent rules. They don't want to be talking about long-term care. And that's why, they're doing a lot right now to try to create some distance with that. The problem, and we saw this federally, and Lindsay touched on this as well, is that things are just so unpredictable with COVID right now. The federal Conservatives were doing quite well driving the agenda the first 3 weeks of the campaign when they were talking about issues they wanted to be talking about. Afghanistan inflation numbers were coming out showing the highest inflation in a decade. Foreign policy and pocketbook issues, bread and butter Conservative issues. But if you do the same thing provincially as they did federally and make the strategic choice to just kind of ignore the broader conversation that was going on and not confront it, it might end up being more damaging in the end, especially if you don't have a compelling narrative of your own. So I'd really encourage the provincial Tories to take a good look at what they can do better, because ultimately, at the end of the day, in some contexts, we're going to be talking about the pandemic.
Yeah, and of course, Lindsay, opposition parties are going to start and have already begun positioning themselves right now. How do you think Stephen Del Duca is performing at the moment, and what should his strategy be in the next 6 months?
Well, the good news is the polling numbers are requiring people to pay attention to what the Liberals have to say. The 2018 election was what I think most people acknowledge as a bit of a blip for a major party that has always been either government or opposition. So the people are taking him as a very serious option, and I think the strategy right now has been some of those smaller pocketbook issues that would resonate with people and get into the mind of voters and especially the seasonality of the rebate on your snow tires and, bringing back the credit for getting an electric vehicle, for example. So there's things that are about just small things that would make a financial difference in people's day-to-day lives, that are good for the environment, that are in that Liberal hold of people being conscious, intentional voters in those sort of more left of center frames, but also with a pocketbook ledge. So that's kind of the direction right now. But the one disadvantage you always have as an opposition party, and this happened in the federal election as well, is you put out a lot of items to try to have something stick, right? And you have to keep driving that content, and you can dilute a message. But 6 months out, in a time frame that is going to be even more wild than the 2018 election, where we remember Doug Ford only became the leader 6 weeks before an election. This time frame and the vulnerabilities around this election that could maybe not be as much of a disadvantage for opposition leaders as it usually is.
Yeah, Andrew, that's interesting, because I think, does Stephen Del Duca, in your opinion, does he have to have a careful balance in that? Lindsay brings up a great point, is you don't want to dilute things by putting too many things out there and throwing them against the wall. There's that, and the other side of it is you need to have that careful balance of telling people what you're going to do, and there's obviously going to be, when it comes to politics, he's going to point out everything or a lot of things that the Conservative government did wrong. What is the proper balance, do you think, Del Duca needs to have?
He's fighting a battle on both sides, right? Because I do think that the Premier is a rather polarizing figure. So I do think, in terms of motivating those Liberals who stayed home last time, it's going to be really important that Del Duca says something or does something and gives that fight to show that he really wants to take the job, not only or not just as Premier, but if he falls short on that, that he wants the job as leader of the opposition. Look, I'm really not sure the Liberals can go to the people of Ontario and make a real credible case coming from 7 seats to go to say we're going to form a majority government. Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, for sure. But that's an excellent point.
In that sense. So I think, and we've already seen Del Duca make some of these announcements in recent days that are a little bit of a box-checking exercise. They're aimed at getting the NDP votes back and possibly motivating some of those Liberals who stayed home last time. Some issues around sort of the childcare stuff, the electric vehicle rebate. Del Duca's question really needs to be to his voters a message of, here's how Andrea Horwath has failed progressives. We're going to do a better job than the NDP at keeping Doug Ford in line.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Lindsay, since Andrew brought up the NDP. I mean, Andrea Horwath, this is her last kick at the can. I can't imagine. I can't imagine she would not step down. It's almost, well, she'll be forced to. There's no way she's going another election. But this has to be something that Stephen Del Duca looks at, and I think he can do it in the right way, not to paint it as if you vote for the NDP, it's a completely lost vote. But he does, and he can get some of those votes, can't he?
Absolutely, and especially when you look at the results from this past federal election where they hold, the NDP might hold a seat provincially, but they came in third. And particularly when you look at the vote share that the NDP got in the 905 area in the 2018 election to have just been decimated federally. So it is very interesting ground in terms of the vote share that is available there, both in people that did switch their vote from Liberal to NDP, but also, as Andrew mentioned, the fact that quite often it is that Liberals are more likely to stay home in an election where they're not happy.
Right.
So there is a lot there for the taking. Now, it is about making sure that there is a progressive voice, but also one that would be a good manager, right? So there is that balance between, it's not just pandering to the left. It is that people clearly are going to have an appetite for somebody that would be a good manager during an uncertain times. And the one thing that I would say that I think people will see as they get introduced to Stephen, and something that perhaps Ford has not thought about, is just, how strong a debater, how quick-witted Stephen is. There's a lot of people, that is the big challenge, is introducing him to Ontarians. For those that know him personally and have seen him perform both as a minister, as a former staffer, as people that know him in a day-to-day life, know that he is an excellent communicator, a great storyteller, and just very quick-witted, that there is a great opportunity for him in a campaign that will be all about delivering a strong message to voters. Yeah,
I'm glad you bring that up. I think a lot of his characteristics and his personality, if he gets out there and he showcases himself, I think he's quite likable. Coming up after the break, we're going to continue the fun with Ontario politics this week, because we're going to talk about the Ontario Auditor General Report. So buckle up, everybody. We'll be back with Lindsay, Maskell, and Andrew Brander. This is The Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
We just took over this business about a few weeks prior to the pandemic, but we've been loving the community, the people, very friendly. But it's been very difficult starting up a new business, just the time that we did, but I'm sure it's the same everywhere. We did take a broken business, which doesn't help us, but we thought we believe in what we do. We're very passionate about food, and we just really wanted to share the Iraqi culture through our food. All our recipes are homemade, so this is very unique. Usually you hear restaurants, shops, it's all frozen food or prepared food. So nothing here is prepared, everything is homemade. We get our meat and produce from a local farm. So supporting local is the way to go. We are supporting all the way. And our meat are actually marinated the day of, so it's as fresh as can be. Quality ingredients, and everything is made from scratch. I get a lot of people when they come in, they say it tastes like Middle Eastern, like back home. So for you to have been to Iraq and have the food there, you can really compare and see the similarity. We do like to focus on healthy. So our recipes, not only the homemade, again, everything is from scratch, but we have from combos and to small sandwiches. One of our favorites and very popular is the chicken salad and the beef salad. So now you're getting all the protein and all these amazing ingredients that we all need. During this time, I find a lot of people are sitting at home and not enough movement. So to come here and get something healthy other than go elsewhere and just put, what's not so good for our bodies, makes a huge difference. So we have shawarma sandwiches, combos. I mean, if you're looking for a meal to feed your family, I would highly recommend the family platter. It comes literally with everything, with potatoes, with rice, with chicken, with beef. And we don't charge extra for mix. I know a lot of places do. Here we just add everything to your platter. And lots of healthy choices for sure. We're very passionate about food. And for our small family business, it's It's been good. Like I said, it's a little struggle, but we are not a chained restaurant.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here from Rogers TV, filling in for Rob for the rest of the week. We continue the second half of Ontario politics this week. I'm excited about this one because, every time an Auditor General report comes out, it just, we all salivate at it in the media. We just look and go, oh boy, there's lots to talk about. But I wonder how it stacks up against years past. We'll talk to our strategists, Lindsay, Maskell, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Dalton McGuinty, and Andrew Brander, senior consultant with Crestview Strategy and former advisor to the Ford government. Continue on this conversation with Ontario politics, and let's talk about the Ontario AG report. Andrew, what are your reactions to the report?
You're clearly much more excited than I am.
I'm trying to get the good listener excited here, Andrew, because I don't really think there's a lot. There's not a lot of meat to this one. I wasn't too.
There wasn't, and quite frankly, I think it was a bit of a snore. Look, Lindsay will say the same thing on days like the AG's report when you're sitting in your office at Queen's Park. You may have been fortunate enough to have, if you were under review, obviously had a advanced copy of your specific department's review,
right?
But there's usually a lot of nerves around these types of reports. It's typical for a government to plan a big announcement on the same day to sort of create some kind of distraction and give a good visual when responding to these types of reports. Not unsurprising yesterday to see Ford out in Mississauga announcing the building of Canada's biggest hospital with the redevelopment of Trillium. But quite frankly, I don't think they needed the distraction yesterday.
Yeah.
Look, there were some interesting takeaways. The $210 million written off through sort of fraud in the small business program. But I think, look, everyone knew there would be some of these stories in terms of programs that were created on a moment's notice. Money was flying through the door to support people through COVID. And quite frankly, it also corners the opposition a little bit in their criticisms. I think we've seen the Liberals federally make this argument. Well, would you rather have had our businesses closing and people out on the streets? So, I don't think there's a lot here. There's certainly not the fiery stuff we used to see thrown at the Liberals back in the early days. But you'll recall also the Ford government really sort of cracked down on the scope and mandates of these officers of the legislature when they first came in. So now these, a lot of these reports are a lot more narrow and a lot more sort of restructured around sticking to a finite mandate. One thing I'd flag, there's still two very big reports that are due before the end of the year, the Ombudsman report and the Patients Ombudsman report. I think we'll, if you're looking for fiery things to talk about, I think there's going to be a bit more juice coming out of those two.
Yeah, I agree. And just a reminder to listeners, Bonnie Lysyk, the Ontario Auditor General, is going to be joining us after the 11 o'clock news. Lindsay, does this damage the Premier's credibility sort of as a fiscally responsible Conservative? $210 million, thrown out the window. I know to all of us, it's a lot of money, right? You get into the millions of dollars, the tens of millions and the hundreds of millions, but you can't go back and try to grab this money back from small businesses, 10 to 14,000. It probably averages out to be. But does this hurt his credibility as a fiscally responsible Conservative at all?
Well, it will be one of many parts of a story that can be told about not walking the talk about his fiscal responsibility. And, you don't have to have lived in Toronto to have heard, stop the gravy train and all of these issues.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, he has a very different brand to this than the Trudeau government does. The other thing is those were supports that both went to people and businesses. These supports rolled out a lot later than the emergency wage and rent subsidies. These were top-up grants that didn't have accountability that you would expect. And Andrew nailed it when he said, because the government also has changed a lot of scope and requirements and those issues those things that usually help us have that level of accountability. The Auditor General and I have never agreed on accounting formulas, but I do think that they serve a very important role. And I have been in a minister's office as a chief of staff under review of the staff of the General Auditor's office. And it's a very important part of the process of accountability, and the fact that their scope is limited is a problem. But it does also have a bit of a continued hit on the narrative that they are that they are fiscally responsible, because not just because of the pandemic. We've seen this from budget number one, day one of this government, was they are actually big spenders.
And Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca calls the Ontario Business Grant overspending inexcusable, incompetent. I'm not sure I buy that, especially when, after what we see the federal Liberals' business support spending was. And, there again, the same thing happened in that kind of situation, Andrew, where you roll something out and you know what, things are going to fall through the cracks. Can Stephen Del Duca take any of this and be able to roll with it, as we get closer and closer? I kind of feel like this is going to be forgotten as we get closer to the election.
It's a one-day story. And again, I think he came out and said what he needed to say. I'm agreeing a lot with Lindsay today.
What's going on, you two?
I gotta say, I'm really not sure at any point, especially in the past 2 years, anyone's really accused Premier Doug Ford of being a fiscal conservative. But look, it's funny. Last week we were talking a bit about polls, and when we were talking about that, I was looking through some of the recent provincial issue set polling. And when it came to the issue of fiscal management, the PCs were preferred over the Liberals at almost a 2-to-1 margin. It shows how strong the provincial conservative brand is on the issue of economy and deficits, or more so, it shows how weak the Liberals are. So what's actually ironic about this type of issue is the more of a mess that the government creates with the finances, the more it becomes an issue, the more you start to see it creep up the list of priorities for voters. And if that's the ballot question on election day, with that 2-to-1 ratio, believing that the PCs are the right guys to clean it up, it only actually benefits them in the long run. So I think that's an interesting sort of takeaway from the worse the finances get, the more people are convinced that the government that's currently in power are actually the ones to fix it.
Well, last word to Andrew there. Andrew Brander, Senior Consultant with Crestview Strategy and former advisor to the Ford government. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Lindsay Maskell, Liberal strategist and former advisor to Dalton McGuinty. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Thanks, Derick.
All right, take care. Coming up after the break, oh boy, it is your hour. It's the 10 o'clock hour. 10 to 11 o'clock, we hand the airwaves over to you. As you know, we want to hear from you. And this, I think we're going to get some talkers. We're going to get some people calling in on this. Should teenagers get to vote? That is our question here. We're talking about the 16 and 17-year-old age group. A group of young Canadians has launched a court challenge to lower Canada's minimum age for voting in federal elections. On Tuesday, 13 young people from across the country ranging in age from 12 to 18 filed an application at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice arguing that the section of the Canada Elections Act which bars Canadians under 18 from voting in federal elections is unconstitutional. That's what we're talking about after the break. Our number, 613-750-1310. This is Derick Fage filling in right here on Rogers TV and City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 2nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, raining and 3 degrees, 4 degrees in Smith Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A change in who can receive a booster shot for COVID vaccine is coming later on today. Here's City News reporter Alex Bloomfield.
Dr. Kieran Moore will speak at 2 o'clock this afternoon to announce this change. The main details appear to have already emerged, though. The province expected to lower eligibility for third doses of COVID vaccines to anyone 50 and older. Previously, the threshold for age was 70 plus. Also, for a few high-risk groups, third doses were okay. And for those who had 2 doses of AstraZeneca earlier in the rollout. In terms of the timeline for this, it also looks like that will be moved up with some of these appointments for these newly eligible groups. Up to 4 million more arms in the province could start being booked by the middle of this month, as opposed to the first quarter of next year, which seemed to be the expectation before some of the fears around the Omicron variant emerged in recent weeks. The 7-day rolling average has now risen for 32 straight days in the province. Variant or not, it appears today's number will be back over 900 again, which would push it higher for yet another day. Alex Bloomfield, City News.
Now, one local doctor who gained attention with her Jabapalooza clinics wants to see these boosters opened up even more. Dr. Neely Kaplan-Mirth tweets, the province should just open boosters to anyone 168 days after their second dose. She says without offending seniors, it is a 30 to 40-year age group who are the essential workers. The doctor says they're also the ones who are more likely to have young children. Once again, the province will be announcing an expanded booster shot age group from 50 plus this afternoon at 2. GlaxoSmithKline says its COVID-19 antibody drug appears to be effective against the Omicron variant based on some initial lab testing.
The British drug maker says it hopes to complete testing by year's end to confirm whether the drug is effective against all the various mutations seen with the new variant. The announcement is one of the first indications that at least some of the current COVID-19 treatments will retain their potency against this emerging strain. On Tuesday, rival drug maker Regeneron cautioned that its antibody cocktail appeared to lose effectiveness against Omicron. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Now, coming up, a cyber breach at the GG's office. City News Time 10:04. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Well, our unsettled weather continues. We'll have cloudy conditions, some rain mixing with snow at times, and then all rain for the afternoon. Milder air working in, a gusty wind out of the southwest. The high 6 degrees. Tonight, light rain ending early in the evening, the mainly cloudy, and a low near -6. Tomorrow, sun, cloud, colder, and about -4. For today, the high +6.
And right now, with light rain, it's 3 degrees in Ottawa, 4 degrees in Smiths Falls. There has been a security breach at the office of the Governor General. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney with that story.
In a statement released this morning, the Office of the Secretary to the Governor General says there was an unauthorized access to the internal network at Rideau Hall. However, the nature and the scope of the breach are still under investigation. The office says it's working with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity on the investigation and took immediate action to strengthen its network. It says it will work with experts to make further improvements as needed. The Centre for Cybersecurity says it cannot release any specific details of the data breach. So right now, it's not clear if any sensitive information at Rideau Hall was accessed in this security breach. The Governor General's office says ensuring the protection of personal information of all who work and interact with the Governor General is a priority for the office. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off. I am Derick Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV. I am filling in for the rest of the week. It is the Talkback Hour. It is your hour. 10 to 11 o'clock every day, we open up the airwaves and we say, hey, we want to hear from you. What is the subject today? Oh, it's one that David has been working on all morning. As a matter of fact, not just all morning. I think David began this like yesterday afternoon. This story of should teenagers, 16 and 17 years old, have the right to vote. A group of young Canadians has launched a court challenge to lower Canada's minimum age for voting in federal elections. On Tuesday, 13 young people from across the country, ranging in age from 12 to 18, filed an application at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, arguing that the section of the Canada Elections Act, which bars Canadians under 18 from voting in federal elections, is unconstitutional. The group is making the argument that the rule violates two sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Here are the two sections. Section 3, which states that every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election for members of the House of Commons or a legislative assembly. And Section 15, which states that every individual is equal before and under the law. One of the teens in the group actually lives in Ottawa. Her name is Zoe Purvis. It's Purvis.
Zoe
Thank
Purvis.
You. Zoe Purvis is her name.
Do off the air.
Thank you very much. That's okay. You know what? We're human, David. I can make a mistake. I don't feel bad. I can make a mistake. First time I saw the name. One of the teens, lives in Ottawa. Her name is Zoe Purvis, as you just heard. She's a high school student at Glebe Collegiate, and she's quoted in the Ottawa Citizen this morning on why she's joined the group looking to start a court challenge of the Elections Act. I'm in this city where politics are so important. Everyone is talking about politics, including my friends, but none of us can really take action. A lot of politics being discussed over there at Glebe Collegiate. And she goes on, as much as we protest and as much as we get involved, none of us have any say when it comes to elections. That's really concerning for me. Purvis says young people hold strong views on education, the environment, and social reform that should form part of the national discourse. That's from the Ottawa Citizen this morning. So that's their argument. Teenagers care, so they should be allowed to vote. and also not letting them vote is unconstitutional. What do you think of this idea? 613-750-1310. I'm bringing in David here before we go to some calls, because David has opinions on everything, and this one in particular. David wants to give some context because he's, as I said, he's been going through and he's been looking at all the different variables here. So, David, give us some context into this because this really stood out to you, this story.
Yeah, well, I always like to do my best to provide the whole picture here. So, like, this isn't happening in isolation. There's actually quite a bit of recent parliamentary context for this.
Okay.
In the last sitting of Parliament last year, there were actually 2 bills introduced to the House that were aimed at lowering the voting age, amending the Elections Act, which is exactly what this group is trying to do.
I'm going to guess which parties may have put forward.
You go right ahead and guess that.
This bill. I'm going to say either one or both of the NDP and the Liberal Party.
It was indeed the NDP. It came from the Vancouver area MP Don Davies. He's a pretty outspoken guy in the media quite a bit. So he introduced some Bill C-240. It was called an act to amend the Canada Elections Act, and that was introduced on March the 20th, 2020. Never got past first reading. It ultimately died on the order paper. You remember Justin Trudeau prorogued Parliament back then, middle of the pandemic, but whatever. That's a different story. MP Davies then, when they came back from the prorogation, reintroduced the bill. Again, failed to clear first reading, died on the order paper when the election was held earlier this year. Then, also,
there's more.
Same time. There's more. I was actually really surprised by this, right? There's more. There was also at the same time a bill in the Senate, Bill S-209. That was introduced by Senator Mary Lou McFendren, an independent senator from Manitoba. That bill also, surprise, surprise, didn't go anywhere. Never made it to the House of Commons.
Why aren't they going through, David? Where's the support here for these young people?
The one from Senator McFedrin actually did get through second reading in the Senate, so they did a fair amount of study on it, and they were pretty interested. But it is sort of what the Senate does, so is that really indicative of any real public support? I don't think so. Anyway, Senator McFedrin did reintroduce the bill recently. It's now Bill S-201. It's currently in the Senate. It cleared first reading in the Senate last Wednesday. So that, I think, is a bit of insight into why a group of lawyers have backed this group of teenagers in their court challenge over the Elections Act. So you've got something that's just cleared first reading in the Senate. You've got some parliamentary momentum behind it. But last year when the Senate was studying the bill, they heard from some expert testimony from a researcher who studies the effect of lowering the voting age.
I'm intrigued.
News at the time. So this is from an iPolitics story published February 2021. McFedrin, the senator, organized an information session for the Independent Senators Group, and they heard from an expert called Eva Zeglovitz. Eva Zeglovitz. She's a researcher from Austria, where they lowered the voting age to 16 actually in the 2000s, 13 years ago.
Really?
And iPolitics says more than 20 countries have already done this.
Over 20 have lowered it to 16.
So that's a bit of background for you. I do have more, but more to come.
Yeah. Well, no, we can go through some. Some of them, Austria, Bosnia, but only if you're employed. So we'll go through some of these. Brazil, Cuba, they have other issues. Not just something like that. But, we want to hear from you. Again, 613-750-1310 is our number. We're talking about lowering the age that you're eligible to vote. There is a group, 13 young people from across the country. Their ages range from 12 to 18. They filed an application at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, arguing that it is unconstitutional that they are not allowed to vote. Let's head over to, what do we have here? Bruce from Richmond, who wants to talk about the voting age. Bruce, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think?
I'm on right now?
Yes, sir, you are. You're live with us right now.
Okay, right on. I think it's a bit concerning. You know, and you guys, I think, talked about it, if a child is at 16 years of age, and they want the privilege of voting, I have two thoughts on this.
Okay.
One is, actually three on this. One is it's I think you guys talked about it. It's kind of it's tough charging a 16-year-old as an adult in the court system, And yet the court system says, hey, they're not mature enough at that age. You know, they made foolish decisions. You know, that's kind of a given.
Yeah.
But you know, the whole thing is a weird goulash. You know, a kid can get married at the age of 15 with their parents' consent. And at the age of 16, they can join the army, or they can drive, or they can get married without their parents' consent.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, at the age of 18, they're walking into the LCBO, and they're allowed to vote, which I have no problem with at 18.
Right.
And I don't know I don't even know what the tobacco laws are. I don't know what the age they can buy tobacco and stuff like that.
I believe tobacco's 21. Of course, alcohol is 19.
Yeah, 19 for alcohol.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, when it comes to child support issues, now I went through this years and years and years ago. When it comes to child support, you have to pay, even if they're 30 years old. If they're going to school and they're living off of mom and dad, or living off a mom and a dad, and all of a sudden they're deemed a child.
Really?
Absolutely.
Under child support. Interesting.
On child support.
Okay. I'll look into that.
You can Google that. Years ago, I was going through I went through a divorce, and on my youngest son's 19th birthday, I had a big celebration. Hey, no more child support. And then all of a sudden, about 2 months later, I'm getting a notice from the Family Responsibility Office saying, listen, you know, we're gonna can your driver's license here, and we're going to you know, until this is paid, you're back arrears. And I said, hey, I've paid everything up. I've always paid. And they're like, no. So I actually got on the phone, called a number of people, and they said, no, if your child is still a dependent.
Yeah. This is true. Yeah.
And 30 years of age. I asked the guy, I said, make me laugh. I said, I want to find something funny out of this. He said, listen, even if they're 30 years old and they are still going to school and they are still living with at your ex-wife's place or your place, and they're depending on you,
they're still considered a dependent, and you still have to pay child support.
So which is another whole discussion. But
for sure.
So how does the courts deem? How could the courts possibly deem that, hey, children at 16 are adults, and then all of a sudden they turn around and they go, well, you know, but they're not an adult, for paying the child support.
Yeah, it's two different, completely different issues for sure. Bruce, really appreciate the call. Thanks so much for calling in. But yeah, that's a totally different conversation. Something that we can have a look at perhaps down the road as another topic. The question here is, should teenagers age 16 and 17 get to vote? We have one line available at the moment. You can give us a call, 613-750-1310. This is Derick Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on Rogers TV and City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher. Okay, you want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. You know, there's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin. Okay, it's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. You know, then customer service. You know, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not, if you ask for something, they're not going to point. It's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there. Okay. If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers, and we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, you know, can you try getting me this? You know, can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now, okay? So we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to, you know, live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them that, you know, like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, you know, from like all over the world. And we source it through, you know, distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. Nothing really complicated about that. We turn over a lot of product. We package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You're always going to find, Cuddy turkey breast, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. Your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag, you open it up and you throw it in the bin. Takes, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
That is correct. The Rob Snow Show continues. Without Rob Snow, this is Derick Fage filling in for Rob for the rest of the week. Our question for you today. During the talkback hour, should teenagers get the vote? A group of young Canadians have launched a court challenge to lower Canada's minimum age for voting in federal elections. We're going to go over to Paul from Ottawa and get his thoughts on this. What do you think, Paul? 16 and 17-year-olds voting in federal elections, for or against?
Well, I'm going to pull a typical politician move, and I'm sort of on the fence about it.
Okay.
I do see some contradictions here in our current policy. At 16, we can ask you to fight in the military, go off and fight for our country and whatnot. You can drive. You have to pay taxes when you're working at the age of 16 and 17.
Right.
So taxation without representation is an issue there, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, as a high school teacher, since the pandemic, I've seen kids become a little bit more politically active in some ways, politically aware. And one thing that's coming up is this massive amount of spending that we've been doing.
Right.
So I do see 16 and 17-year-olds and even younger kids going, hey, like this debt that's, basically being put on them, it's not us that's going to pay it back. They see it as really unfair. And you know what? When you look at those factors and you add them together, it seems like they do deserve a say, in my opinion.
It's an interesting perspective as far as the finances go, because I think for most adults, they certainly get the feeling that young people they care about the environment, they care about injustices. There's a lot of these sort of social issues, and that the financial side of things often gets left out of the conversation, but you're hearing from young people that they do care about that. The other side of it too, Paul, is, being a teacher, I can guarantee you that conservatives, and we have many conservative listeners, are probably thinking to themselves, well, if we open up the voting to 16 and 17-year-olds, most people in your profession are, sort of liberal voters, and they're going to encourage 16 and 17-year-olds to vote for the party that they're interested in, and they're going to politicize the classroom. What about your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the only studies I've seen on the way that teachers vote was Canada-wise. I've never seen any study on Ontario. And we vote no different than the regular population, as it turns out. So
interesting.
I've been in the profession for a while, and I don't see an imbalance between the political opinions here versus outside. So I wonder whether that's just true. I can see why people think that, and sometimes I sort of think that way, but you know what? We can't say that definitively. So be careful when we move that forward. The other thing is that the news, the kids are getting more politically active.
Oh, for sure.
Socially, as well as economically, though. And that's, I want to go back to one of my points on that, in that if, a lot of the kids are talking about being able to afford a home in the future and how it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
And it's guys, these kids are coming up and saying that, their financial future looks weak. I do not have a good counter argument to that. I cannot disagree when they express that concern. They express concerns about homes in the future. Again, I can't. I can.
Listen, Paul. I have a 16-year-old and a 21-year-old, so I know exactly where you're coming from. Now, I will give them credit. They are financially responsible in that my son, who's 21, has already started contributing to his TFSA since the age of 18. My daughter did it on her own, but I guess it comes back to parenting as well, but she has invested into a couple of mutual funds, and not with the idea necessarily of saving up to buy a home down the road, but just understanding that saving as soon as you can is incredibly important. So I think you're onto something. I mean, I think young people are. However, what group of young people are we talking about, right? Because young people come from very different backgrounds, very different environments.
They're just like the rest of the population. And they do bring up a good point, and they say that it seems that debt is the way that governments are going. And you need not look any further than just the way the city of Ottawa decided to borrow some money to fix the roads instead of actually dipping into the reserve funds.
Yeah, we talked about that, yeah.
Like, when that's the reality out there, like, how can you turn to someone who's 16 and say, I want you to go fight for the country. I want you to pay your taxes. And you know what? It seems our answer to everything is just to, borrow money on your behalf to solve our problems.
Paul, you make some compelling arguments. Really appreciate the call today. I'm going to move on, but I just wanted to say I really appreciate it. Excellent perspective. Before we get to some other calls, I'm going to bring David back in here because he's done some research on this just to give you some more context. iPolitics is saying, there's like 20 countries that have a voting age of 16, and you've looked up some of your own stats, David.
Yeah, listen, I don't know where iPolitics got their 20 number from, but they're a reputable outlet, so I don't dispute it. I don't get paid enough to do that kind of research, so I looked up my numbers from worldatlas.com. Here's what I found.
Okay.
Argentina, you can vote at age 16, but it's optional for people aged 18 to 70 in that country. It's actually mandatory to vote.
And that's interesting.
Australia does that as well. We could do a whole other hour on whether it should be mandatory. Mm-hmm. Over the age of 70, in Argentina, you don't have to vote if you're over 70. I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
Austria, as I mentioned, Austria gets a lot of focus. They were the first country on the European continent to lower it to 16 and 17 for voting. I don't know that much about Austria as a country, how it's structured, whether or not that makes sense for their electoral system. In Bosnia, you can vote if you're 16, but only if you're employed. So
that's interesting because that's what Paul just brought up, right? There's that 16 and 17-year-olds. If they're working, they're paying taxes.
The odd 16 or 17-year-old may live on their own, may work full-time, and may pay a lot of taxes. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Brazil, you can vote if you're 16. In Cuba, you can vote when you're 16. I would put an asterisk next to that one.
Yes.
Cuba's got some other issues.
Agreed, yeah.
Ecuador, you can vote if you're 16. Ethiopia, you can vote if you're 16. Maybe an asterisk next to that one. Something called Guernsey.
That's a little small island.
That's a little island in the British Channel. The Isle of Man, the country Jersey, Nicaragua, and this would be the closest comparison we could have to our country, which is Scotland. In Scotland, you can vote if you're 16.
Interesting. Taiwan, I see, age 20, Singapore,
some
21.
other fun facts. I think that the most interesting one is in the United Arab Emirates. You can't vote until you're 25.
25?
They're going the other way with it.
Yeah.
25, interesting. Kuwait, 21. Sudan is age 17, just as an outlier. Singapore, Malaysia, 21.
I wonder, if you're 16, 17, you're paying taxes, then you get to. I mean, is there a balance here? Is there a compromise, or do we just open it up to all 16 and 17-year-olds?
Well, as Andrew Boyle earlier said, they should have to take a test. Give them a test in school, a civics test. If you could prove you are politically engaged, then we'll let you
hold on now. Hold on.
Like a bit of a can of worms.
Then I agree 100% because with the voter turnout, federally, provincially, municipally in this country, I think we got to give that test to everybody, not just 16 and 17-year-olds, right? At least it would get... Actually, I think you should just be mandatory. You have to do the test, and if you do it, perhaps it would be an incentive for you to vote because now you are informed. right?
You might want to vote after you do the test.
Exactly.
There you go.
So maybe not make voting mandatory, but you have to. I don't know. Obviously, it wouldn't fly. But make a test mandatory. Every 4 years, you have to fill out this test to see how knowledgeable you are on the political landscape and social issues here in this country.
I think we might be overcomplicating the issue.
Yeah, no one's buying that. Yeah. I understand. And our first caller there was talking about. So for these young people that want to vote at 16, 17, well, what about being tried as an adult then at the age of 16 and 17? Because Canada doesn't have that distinction at the trial stage. But if the charges are serious enough, the Attorney General can direct the Crown to request that a youth be sentenced as an adult if convicted. Instead of just that, just right across the board, 16, 17. Listen, we got a lot of callers calling in. We're going to take a break. Your news is coming up in just a moment. This is the Rob Snow Show. I'm Derick Fage, filling in right here on Rogers TV and City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley, this is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 2nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, raining and 4 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, the Provincial Chief Medical Officer of Health will announce an additional age eligibility for the booster shot for COVID vaccines. Dr. Kieran Moore expected to announce those 50 and older will qualify for a third shot as long as they are 168 days past their second. The number of new COVID cases across the province today, 959. There have also been 7 more deaths recorded. 59 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 18 are in Eastern Ontario, 6 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 4 new cases in Renfrew. 2.9% of the over 38,000 tests that were done came back positive. There's been a security breach at the office of the Governor General. Mary Simon's secretary confirms there was an unauthorized access to the internal network. There are not many details about the breach, but the office says it is under investigation. More with Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney coming up at 11 o'clock. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Well, thank you for that news update, Andrew Boyle. Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here, filling in for Rob for the rest of the week here on Rogers TV and City News. We are talking, should teenagers get to vote? I'm talking about the 16 and 17-year-old age group, because there's a group of young Canadians that have launched a court challenge to lower Canada's minimum age for voting in federal elections. Let's go back to the phones right away. We'll head over to Brendan in Blackburn. Brendan, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, my gosh, I enjoy your show, and I think that 90% of the young teenagers should be allowed to vote.
What about the other 10%, Brendan?
Well, you know, immaturity and all that comes into play, and...
well, you wonder even, Brendan, what the turnout will be, right? I'm just thinking for myself. I have a 16-year-old daughter. I think, you know, she's interested in politics. She understands, you know, a lot that's happening. Will her and her peers go out in big numbers? I mean, the turnout in this country for federal elections is quite poor already. How many of those young people are even going to vote? So, I mean, if you're greatly concerned, maybe there's nothing really to be concerned about.
Oh, no. Younger generations are so well equipped to handle the situation. They talk to their parents in the past, and they realize that today is a different age, and the younger generation deserve a chance to change politics in a positive way.
Brendan, really appreciate the call. Thanks so much for calling in today. All right, let's head over to Sean in Brockville. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my question would be, if 16 and 17-year-olds given the right to vote, would they then be allowed to run?
Oh, interesting. Oh, Sean, this is something I hadn't thought of. I guess I have no problem with that. That would be interesting to see, because I can imagine their peer group would really galvanize around one of their, you know, somebody in that age group that decided to run. I don't see a problem. I mean, if you're going to allow them to vote, why not allow them to run? Excellent point.
Argument, and I'm not arguing for or against, but the argument would be, if a 16-year-old were to run and win, how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden they're thrust into a full-time job in politics.
High school?
Yeah, interesting, Sean. I wonder what is, so those 18 or over, I imagine, can run, right? You have the right to vote?
I think so.
Yeah.
A quick Google search tells me you have to be a minimum age of 18 in order to run for government, at least in Ontario.
So I wonder if you could. I wonder if you could perhaps balance that and say, okay, you can vote, but you can't run. But you bring up an interesting question. Thanks so much for the call, Sean. Appreciate it. Let's head over to Tony in Lombardy. Tony, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm good.
Excellent. I'm doing very well, thanks. What do you think about this, Tony?
I think I would let them vote.
Okay.
That's okay. Perfectly okay anyway. But they should take the consequences for everything else too.
What kind of what consequences are you referring to, Tony?
I do say they build a shit or criminal or whatever. They should be treated like adults too after, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be an adult in every sense of the word, when it comes to voting, then you should be an adult across the board, right?
Yeah, and you should go in the jails with the big guys, not just a slap in your hands, right?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I mean, that's going to be an argument for sure.
Always the parents are reliable for them after, right?
Right.
And that's not right. Then they shouldn't be. But when they want to be voting, they should be man enough and say what they do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your call. Just want to put into context, by the way, our number, 613-750-1310. This is the Talk Back Hour. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. So I'm just going to, just bring back some of the context here of why we're discussing that. So a group of young Canadians has launched a court challenge to lower Canada's minimum age for voting in federal elections. On Tuesday, 13 young people from across the country, ranging in age from 12 to 18, filed an application at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice arguing that the section of the Canada Elections Act, which bars Canadians under 18 from voting in federal elections, is unconstitutional. And you're saying, Derick, why is it unconstitutional? What are they talking about? Well, they are making the argument that the rule violates two sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Section 3, which states that every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election for members of the House of Commons or a legislative assembly. And Section 15, which states that every individual is equal before and under the law. So one of the teens in the group actually lives here in Ottawa. Her name is Zoe Purvis. She is a high school student at Glebe Collegiate, and she's quoted in the Ottawa Citizen this morning on why she's joined the group looking to start a court challenge of the Elections Act. Here's a quote from her. I'm in this city where politics are so important. Everyone is talking about politics, including my friends, but none of us can really take action on it. And then she goes on, as much as we protest and as much as we get involved, none of us have any say when it comes to elections. That's really concerning for me. Purvis says young people hold strong views on education, the environment, and social reform that should form part of the national discourse. Paul, a teacher, speaking to him a little bit earlier during the talk back hour, was saying not only is he hearing about education, environment, and social reform in his classroom settings, he's also hearing about fiscal responsibility. And if I was to give advice, by the way, to this group, I would include fiscal responsibility in this because that is a big part of politics. And regardless of what political party it is that you're going to back or you're going to vote for, fiscal responsibility, especially with the historical debt numbers that we've accumulated due to the pandemic, and I know we had to spend a lot of money. There's no doubt in my mind. Any political party that would have been in office at the federal level, Ontario level, municipal level, they would have had to spend more money than they would have ever imagined. There's no doubt in my mind. But that has to be part of Zoe Purvis's and the other 12 in this. That has to be part of your platform, right? Fiscal responsibility, education, the environment, and social reform. By the way, that was from the Ottawa Citizen this morning. So that's their argument. Teenagers care, so they should be allowed to vote. And also not letting them vote is unconstitutional. We want to hear from you. 613-750-1310. We return to the phones. Michael from Orleans. Michael, what do you think about this idea of 16 and 17-year-olds?
Derick, you're doing a great job, bud.
Thanks very much, Michael. Appreciate it.
Listen, when you register to vote, you have to have your ID and a T4. If you have both of those, then you can vote. Plain and simple. If you're paying into a system, then you have a voice in the system. Now, for the Conservatives, and I am one of them, I'll preface. Yeah. Now, there'll be a huge uptick in NDP and Liberal voting, and that's okay, because that's the way I thought when I was not in the real world. But
me too.
You know, eventually they'll come to the Conservative side, and the earlier you get them involved in politics, the more aware they'll be. But the reason and I'll make this quick there, the reason I had to call you is because the educator that was on, and that was the impetus for me calling you.
Okay.
He said he couldn't understand why Ottawa went into the debt and not their
reserves.
Reserve. Is this guy educating our children? You don't go into your reserves when you have record low interest rates of borrowing.
I get it, but then the other side of it, Michael, is then when do you go in? When do you? I mean, when's the right time? You wait for interest rates to go up, and then that's the time you decide, or do you decide when you actually need funds to do something? And I guess what they figure is an emergency type of situation because the roads are so poor.
The emergency situation, and then again, I have to. When I studied economics at Waterloo, if the borrowing rate is so low, you do not touch your reserves. The rainy day scenario is when the interest rate jumps 5 points and you have to fix a bridge.
Right.
That's the rainy day scenario.
I respect that opinion. That's a good perspective, Michael, for sure.
I hope educators such, I believe his name was Paul, get into business in the real world. They haven't cut their teeth out there, and they have to learn. Anyways, you're doing a great job.
Thanks very much, Michael. Appreciate the call. Well, there you have another perspective, right? Okay. Michael says, I don't mind if they vote, 16 and 17 years old. You show up with your ID, but you also show that you are paying taxes, right?
I love that idea, too, that there's this natural progression from you being a young, uninformed NDP voter, and then over time, you grow up and you come over.
I think it's natural, David.
But it's interesting. Yeah, like if we're talking about trying to foster and bolster our participation in democracy in that younger age group, which is abysmally low. Very, very few people under the age of 30 vote. It's really quite terrible.
Yeah.
But get them voting early and
those numbers could increase.
And expose them to the fact that, you know, what you think your political ideology is may not line up with the action your desired party takes when they come into power.
Yeah.
We could see, you know,
absolutely
more flips in which parties are in power and different interesting minority government situations. Because in Canada, we have a long-standing history of basically being a bipartisan system. We have opposition parties in the Bloc, the NDP, and the Greens, but they're very rarely making up much of the actual House of Commons demographics. So
yeah, exactly. Well, and I've admitted,
if you think that the NDP should get their day in government, and you think that you know how that's going to go, fine, go ahead and vote for them. We'll put them into power, and we'll see what happens, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
It's just another...
Just talk to somebody that went through the Bob Ray days. That's all I can tell you about that. And, you know, I've said it on the show before, and David brings up a good argument is that, yeah, the way we vote, and also our last caller, Michael, the way we vote changes as we get older. And I have voted NDP in my lifetime. I have voted Conservative. I have voted Liberal. I have also voted Green Party. You know, your perspective on things change dramatically as you get older, and it could change one way or the other, by the way. But I do think Michael is right. For the most part, younger people are lean towards, you know, the NDP and the Liberals. And as you get older, then, you know, and as you start seeing the world and understanding fiscal responsibility, your mind can change, and then you start moving over to you know, the Conservative Party. All right, we have the Talk Back Hour continuing for one more segment after the break. 613-750-1310 is the number. We have one line available. We'll get to all the calls, I promise you. My name is Derick Fage. I'm filling in for Rob Snow right here on Rogers TV and City News.
To opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew that we have to wait, and we knew that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genya Babcia house, how she cooked, I wanted this loaf and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Wedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here from Rogers TV, filling in for Rob. Our question is, should the age group 16 and 17 get to vote? A group of young Canadians have launched a court challenge to lower Canada's minimum age for voting in federal elections. And I'm going to go straight to the phones because they are lighting up. We do have one line available. 750-1310 is the number. Let's send it over to Bill in Ottawa. Bill, what do you think of this idea?
I think it's a dangerous idea.
Really? And why is that, Bill?
Well, we know that the brain doesn't fully develop until much later than 16 or 17. And that's why we have juvenile courts, and that's why we have ages of consent. So the first argument is, if 16 and 17, why not 13 and 14 or 9 or 10? I mean, society has established certain minimum ages.
Yeah, I guess you have to draw the line somewhere because this group is making the argument that the rule violates a couple of sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and one which states that every citizen of Canada has the right to vote in an election. So
that puts 2-year-olds as voters.
Well, that's it. I mean, if you use the actual language, yes, I guess that opens up the door that anybody can be everyone's considered a citizen of this country, right? It doesn't matter what age you are. So yeah, I mean, I think you do open up, sort of Pandora's box here, and where does it stop?
Well, it's a dangerous idea because if these people, this age group is mature enough to vote as adults, then they're mature enough to be tried in adult court, go to adult prison.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There's a trickle down effect.
Consent should be lowered.
Yeah, that's interesting because David has done some great research on finding out, about other countries that have done it. There's approximately 20. I would be very interested to know what those 20 countries say about the very topic that you're bringing up, right? Can 16 and 17-year-olds now be tried as a youth in court? Now that you have the right to vote, right?
Probably not, because our society seems to be emphasizing rights without responsibilities. My last point would be, I don't think the number of voters is important. I think the number of voters who are engaged is important. And that's why we shouldn't have internet voting. If you can't get up off your ass once a year or once every few years and go and vote, the franchise means bugger all.
Bill,
for the language.
You make an excellent. Thanks so much for the call, Bill. You make an excellent argument. It's true. I mean, if you can't get up, once every 4 years, maybe it's once every 2 if you're a minority government and you decide that you're going to, call an election during a global pandemic. But what do you think of that? I mean, because there is a lot of people, David, that have, called for online voting. But, I have as well. But Bill makes a compelling argument. I mean, if you can't get off your butt and vote, well, maybe it's not that important to you, and I don't want you to vote.
Look, I want to talk about the Youth Criminal Justice Act for a second. Because people keep coming back to how we treat young people under the law. So let me dive into this for a second.
Okay.
The Youth Criminal Justice Act, if you're not familiar, came into effect 2003. Liberal government. It creates an entirely separate justice system to deal with criminal offenses perpetrated by youths aged 12 to 17.
Right.
Why did we do this? It's to acknowledge that teenagers are not as responsible as adults. They're not as aware of the consequences of their actions as adults and are more prone to lapses in judgment than adults, and therefore we should not punish them under the law the same way we punish adults. I find this blurb from the Alberta Provincial Court website does a really nice job of summarizing why the Youth Criminal Justice Act was created. And if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to read a little bit.
Yes, please. Yeah.
This is from the website of the Alberta Provincial Court. The act was created in order to ensure that the consequences for young people who break the law are balanced. One of the principles of the act is that while young people must be held accountable for their actions, they should not be treated the same as adults. The act emphasizes rehabilitation, or the opportunity for youth to mature, learn from mistakes, and accept consequences and make amends. So the central argument from this group of teenagers is that the Elections Act is unconstitutional because it only affords the right to vote for citizens over the age of 18. But the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms says all individuals are equal under the law. That's Section 15. So how do you square that circle? We have the Criminal Justice Act. That's constitutional. It says that people of a certain age get special treatment under the law, and it's constitutional. But the Elections Act isn't, because it's not affording that same special treatment. So we have long-established conventions in our society that I think are based on the acknowledgement that teenagers are not the same as adults. We don't sell tobacco, cannabis, or alcohol to people under the 18.
Yeah.
And we don't let 14-year-olds drive.
No, I mean there has to be a line drawn somewhere, and one of the quotes that you just read there is the fact that they haven't matured. So maybe the argument here is, yes, okay, we hear you, Zoe Purvis, and the other 12 high school students, well, the other 12 students between the age of 12 and 8, we understand, but perhaps you just take this opportunity to mature, to educate yourself on many of the issues of the day, including education, environment, social reform, fiscal responsibility. Use your voice to talk about it with your peer groups, to talk about it at the dinner table, to discuss it, to form perhaps a committee at your school, a political committee where you can debate and that sort of thing. And then when you turn 18, you're ready to roll.
Look, to throw out a plea for common sanity here, am I insane to think that the very fact that they're going about doing this in such an organized fashion speaks, I think, to immaturity in and of itself?
In what manner? And doesn't this show 16, some maturity?
You want to be able to vote when you're 16.
Yeah.
But you can't. You have to wait 2 years, just as you have to wait 2 years to do a bunch of other stuff, because that's a well-established convention in Canadian society. And your knee-jerk reaction is to go out to find a bunch of lawyers who will argue on your behalf that your constitutional rights are being infringed.
And lawyers
your gut reaction is, I can't wait 2 years. Waiting 2 years is unconstitutional.
And lawyers would love this. Right? I mean, it's not very difficult to get a lawyer on. But listen, we have 12 young people who are very interested in politics between the ages of 13 young people between the ages of 12 and 18. I think anyone's going to jump on that story because it's a story, and we're talking about it. We're talking about it during a full hour in the Talkback Hour on the Rob Snow Show. Okay, let me get to a couple more calls before we run out of time. Let's head over to Mark in Ottawa. Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
First off, can we just get this straight that 16-year-olds can't go and fight for our country?
Right.
That's crazy nonsense. I don't know where they got that from. These people are coming up with that. I'm sure that the Liberals would just love to have young people come in and vote. As you see how they target them there with, with the COVID supplements, sitting in the basement and stuff, and the weed charities and all this stuff. So I'm sure that would happen. But, and one other last thing. When I was a young man and I moved out, after a couple of years, paying rent and paying bills and everything else, and my parents really smartened up in those 2 years.
Right. Right.
It takes that little bit of time, man. You got to live out and experience the world. You can't be voting for stuff because some politician gives it to you.
Yeah, and Mark, I think a lot of people had their attention turned right away to that most of those young people in that age group would certainly be voting NDP or Liberal. Paul, we had a teacher a little bit earlier that says, he has a lot of students that talk fiscal responsibility, but I think the reality is many of those young people would certainly vote that way. And I'm glad you brought that up, and I should have brought it up as well. You can't join you can't be 16 years old to be forced to fight for the country, and I should have jumped on that right away, and I appreciate that that you brought it up. Let's get a couple of more. Kate in Ottawa wants to talk voting age. Kate, what do you think?
Hi, good morning. I bring my 10-year-old son to vote with me, and we talk about voting and the importance of knowing why I'm voting the way I am.
Right.
Because I was really proud of his teacher. They actually had a mock federal election, the last election, on election day, and they had the results the next day. And Conservatives won, which I'm really surprised because
really?
Yeah, it was really surprising, and I was really proud. But really disappointed in our actual outcome. But yeah, and I really, when I hear that, I'm sure Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are just licking their lips, hoping that this happens, because I think back of last Christmas, do you remember when Justin Trudeau was on TV and he says, "Now parents, I need you to leave the room so I can talk to your children." That kind of stuff scares me.
And you know what? I mean, I think it's up to every political party to reach out to young people, but as David pointed out, that underage, that under 30 group is just, the turnout is absolutely horrible.
Yes,
right.
but I would rather somebody not show up because they are uninformed than somebody show up because they like a good blackface or they like nice hair.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's Kate, thanks so much for your call. Appreciate it. A little shot there. I got it, Kate. I get the shot. Yeah. He's, that's certainly something that he'll never live down, I don't think. I mean, that'll be brought up forever. And just horrible decision making. Really appreciate your calls. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but we've run out of time here. We got to head to the news here. Lots more coming up here on the Rob Snow Show. This is Derick Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on Rogers TV and City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, December 2nd. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, raining and 4 degrees, same conditions in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The Governor General's office confirms there was a cybersecurity breach at Rideau Hall. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney has that story.
In a statement released this morning, the Office of the Secretary to the Governor General says there was an unauthorized access to the internal network at Rideau Hall. However, the nature and the scope of the breach are still under investigation. The office says it's working with the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity on the investigation and took immediate action to strengthen its network. It says it will work with experts to make further improvements as needed. The Centre for Cybersecurity says it cannot release any specific details of the data breach. So right now, it's not clear if any sensitive information at Rideau Hall was accessed in this security breach. The Governor General's office says ensuring the protection of personal information of all who work and interact with the Governor General is a priority for the office. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:03. The number of new COVID cases across the province today numbers 959. Also, 7 more deaths have been recorded. Now, 59 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 18 are in Eastern Ontario, 6 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 4 new cases in Renfrew. Now, 2.9% of the over 38,000 tests came back positive. Now, these numbers come on the day an expanded booster shot program will be unveiled in the province for COVID vaccine. Here's City News reporter Alex Bloomfield.
Now, amid this mounting wave and then the fears over Omicron, the province is set to roll out this expanded booster shot program this afternoon, 2 p.m. Dr. Kieran Moore will address the province and explain what will likely be at this point a lowering of the age threshold for third doses from 70 to 50, and that would add about 4 million people into the eligible bracket for a third dose of a COVID vaccine. Other groups eligible for third doses continue to be, including Indigenous people in the province, as well as those who have 2 doses of AstraZeneca. Alex Bloomfield, City News.
City News Time, 11:04. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Well, our unsettled weather continues. We'll have cloudy conditions, some rain mixing with snow at times, and then all rain for the afternoon. Milder air working in, a gusty wind out of the southwest. The high 6 degrees. Tonight, light rain ending early in the evening, the mainly cloudy, and a low near -6. Tomorrow, sun, cloud, colder, and about -4. For today, the high +6.
And right now, raining and 4 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. OPEC and allied oil-producing countries have voted to maintain the pattern of steady, modest monthly increases in oil release to the rest of the world. That's even as the new COVID-19 Omicron variant is raising concerns about the global economic recovery from the pandemic. A senior oil markets analyst says OPEC Plus is ready to wait for more data on the efficacy of current vaccines on Omicron before making any significant changes to its output strategy. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here filling in for Rob. And we talked about some of these findings a little bit earlier on in the show. And we wanted to circle back because we have Ontario's Auditor General, Bonnie Lysyk, joining us on the show. Welcome to the show, Bonnie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Derick.
I think the big one that people are talking about, Bonnie, is the Ontario Small Business Grant Program. For those people that, haven't had an opportunity to read the papers this morning or just joining us right now, maybe you can talk about, what stood out about this program.
Sure. As part of our audit of COVID expenditures for economic stimulus, we did look at the Ontario Small Business Grant, and that offered 2 payments of $10,000 to $20,000 to businesses that had fewer than 100 employees that were required to close down and had a revenue decline of more than 20%. So what we determined is that about $210 million has been written off by the province as that money was paid to ineligible recipients, and that money won't be recovered. In addition, we noted that some businesses who received a grant were paid about $714 million more. There was a program design issue where people who had submitted less losses ended up receiving a bit more than what they probably, what people would think they should be getting.
Yeah, and these programs are kind of this, the type of thing that's a one-time kind of program, or two-time, I don't see this program necessarily rolling back out unless we get ourselves into some big trouble down the road, which the province, they're not going to try to recover. Is this something that, Bonnie, would you expect as the Auditor General that they won't be trying to recover these costs, and would it be realistic to do so?
Well, $210 million is a lot of money, and that can buy a lot of services. So I think from the perspective of the 210, I think we look back and say, well, what was the root cause of that? And let's not have that root cause happen again. And what that was is rushing out the program with not giving enough time to the IT people to put in place the necessary controls so that money didn't go out the door the way it did. So I think the learning is something you take going forward. Having said that, some of that money, I think, from what I heard yesterday, some of it they might be trying to get back.
Okay.
But I think any time more money is paid out to ineligible people, that there should be efforts to recover that money.
Yeah, and I just wonder if there would be, just the argument from small business if you let it through, and I don't know. There's so much confusion that would come of that. And I'm not saying they shouldn't try. I think they should try. I just think it's going to be a very difficult situation for both the government and these small businesses. Let's talk about the Ontario Together Fund, because the province doesn't seem to be tracking the projects. What stood out to you about the Ontario Together Fund?
Well, that fund provides funding to businesses to develop products that help Ontario's emergency response. So they were to develop ventilators, masks, sanitizing products. So recipients could receive up to about $2.5 million each. So what we found is that 15 of the 54 projects were delayed because there was not consistent monitoring by the ministries to make sure that the projects were on track. And then there was a contract that the ministry staff were a little skeptical about giving the money to the organization. At the end of the day, the organization went bankrupt, and there was $2 million that had to be that was awarded to them that is not retrievable.
Right. MZOs was another one. For those that aren't familiar, maybe you could just explain exactly what an MZO is and what the recommendations were for that.
Sure. So an MZO allows a minister to make an exception to sort of the normal planning processes in the province. Right. So in Ontario, historically, there haven't been very many MZOs, and in the last 2 years, 44 MZOs were issued that basically override the planning process. So the report that we put out, I would recommend people read it. It gives you a sense of how a land planning process for the province is supposed to work, and then what happens when MZOs are issued. But I think our key message is that if MZOs become a course of the planning process, that at least it would be good to establish some kind of criteria and some kind of information on how that works, so that the process is viewed less skeptically, and that the information of how to go through an MZO process is clear to the public, and that those who have vested interests in the environment and in development are all on the same page and understand the rules.
Bonnie, is the fear that MZOs are being abused in this situation? Because they have been used in the past. We're just seeing that they've been used much, much more by this particular government.
Yeah, I would say their use was very rare in the past, maybe 4. So the frequency of use is huge. Legislation has been amended to allow them to be used more frequently. I think it's more the transparency around why they're being used, and I think once the public understands, the decisions and why the decisions are made and whether those decisions are made fairly for all parties involved, then, I think there's some more understanding around them. So, for instance, if they're used for long-term planning, long-term care homes, then people might understand it. If they're used to build on a wetland, people might go, well, why is that happening, and need more information. So our key message is just inform the public what the point of some of these are.
Another issue that came up was the OPP, which was short 1,028 frontline constables last year for a number of different reasons, but many of those positions that sort of remained unfilled. Can you describe that issue?
Sure. When we looked at the OPP, so constables are really important, having feet on the ground to detect and solve crimes. And what we did see is there's about 1,000 positions that are vacant at OPP. A lot of that, what contributed to that is officers having PTSD and going on leave. What we see the repercussion of all of that is, less hours spent patrolling, slower resolution time in various municipalities on the files that they have to investigate and close, and puts pressure on the other officers. So we have commented on that in the report.
How often? I mean, in a reasonable sense, how often do you see, in the past, I don't know how much of the history of the Auditor General reports that you're aware of, but, percentage-wise, how often do these reports come out and something actually gets done with them, Bonnie?
Yeah, so we publish, and then 2 years later we do a follow-up, and then we started a process in the office about 4 years ago where we're following up on recommendations going forward to about 7 years. Because sometimes when we're recommending items, they take longer than just even a year to implement, so we see the evolution. Within 2 years, we expect, and it happens, about 30% of the recommendations are implemented. As time goes by, the frequency increases. Obviously, we'd like to see the frequency of implementation higher, but I do see that they are being taken seriously. And some of the reasons for non-implementation would be, there's policy changes, or there's change in staff, or things are restructured. But I think we hope that every time we put a report out, it creates food for thought. People may implement something that is not directly related to the recommendation, but is thought about as a result of reading the report and the recommendation. So, and when my teams are in the field, there's a lot of discussion, and so that's the benefit as well, is that they're creating information and ideas around the programs and exchanging information with those who run these programs. So there's more than just the recommendations at the end, but they are getting implemented. It's just maybe we'd all like it to be faster than it happens.
Absolutely. Bonnie, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care. That's Bonnie Lysyk, Ontario Auditor General. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Barbara Ramsey, chair of the Kanata Greenspace Protection Coalition. It is the fight to save Canada's golf course Greenspace. It's far from over. A firm looking to turn a Kanata golf course into a new housing subdivision did earn a big win when Ontario's highest court struck down parts of a 40-year-old agreement, barring much of the land from being redeveloped. But the fight is not over. We'll talk to Barbara about that after the break. This is Derick Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in for Rob for the rest of the week. I think most of you know this story, but I will just give you a brief background as I did just before we went to break there. A firm looking to turn a Kanata golf course into a new housing subdivision earned a big win when Ontario's highest court struck down parts of a 40-year-old agreement, barring much of the land from being developed. Club Link, which has owned the club since '96, says the golf course is no longer financially viable and wants to partner with 2 local developers to add homes, build about almost 1,500 homes. I am joined by Barbara Ramsey, chair of the Kanata Greenspace Protection Coalition. Barbara, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Good morning, Derick. Thank you for having me on to talk about this.
A pleasure. And I did, I give a little bit of background there, but Barbara, maybe you can just walk people through the timeline again for those that aren't familiar.
Well, for certain. And I probably would want to start by saying I think you got most of the story right.
Okay.
I honestly, the coalition and our team is of the mind that this wasn't such a big win for Club Link. Admittedly, the Court of Appeal did accept their arguments, but overall, the decision fell well short of what Club Link was asking for, which was an invalidation of the entire 40% agreement. And the Court of Appeal did not give them that. In fact, the Court of Appeal agreed that a small, quite narrow historical legal point which they were arguing was in fact valid, and that is this very confusing rule against perpetuities.
Right.
But to be clear, Derick, they did not, and specifically said they were not invalidating the entire agreement.
Okay, so let's delve a little bit more into what still remains valid and why there is still hope as far as many people are concerned, like yourself.
Sure. So for the non-lawyers among us.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're going to talk to the regular people like myself.
Yes, and I, to be clear, I'm not a lawyer, although I spend an inordinate amount of time in their company these days. The reality is that the entire 40% agreement, as originally envisioned by the City of Kanata and Compo Corporation in 1981, stands in its form as it was originally drawn.
Okay.
The only aspect of it that the Court of Appeal struck is 2 clauses that deal with the transfer of the lands should Club Link decide not to operate it as a golf course.
That's the only thing that was struck.
Right.
And again, not to belabor the point, but for people who are trying to understand, well, what is this perpetuity business? Simply put, those clauses created an issue called a contingent interest in the land. In other words, they promised the city something if Clublink did something. And those kinds of arrangements, according to the law, have an expiration of 21 years. And Clublink has owned the property for 24 or so now. And so their argument was those clauses the city could not hold Clublink to. And that was the transfer of the land back to the city.
Okay.
So that's what was struck.
Right.
The rest of the agreement, the obligation for Clublink to operate the golf course in perpetuity still stands. So let's be clear. While the word perpetuity appears in various places in the document, it matters everywhere it's written and is in force still today everywhere it's written, except on those two clauses about transferring the land back to the city.
Okay.
But the operation of the golf course, the protection of the lands, and the original 40% of all Kanata, which is the golf course lands, and a beautiful spot called Trillium Woods for those that live in Kanata.
Yeah.
That land is still protected. Both the city has an obligation to protect it, and its portion, and Clublink has an obligation to operate a golf course on its portion.
Okay, no, it's certainly you've cleared a lot of things up. Barbara, you mentioned this beautiful area that you're discussing. Maybe you could describe the community that we're talking about here. So those people that aren't familiar with the golf course, is it just a golf course? Are there homes that back onto the golf course? What does the community look like around this? And why is this green space incredibly important? I mean, obviously the environmental side of things alone, it makes it important, but maybe you could just describe the community.
Well, clearly, having this conversation in 2021 and facing what we're globally facing on a matter of climate change and environment, it really is tragic that we're looking at tearing up 175 acres of urban green space. It's illogical. Having said that, however, what the space is, what the entire community is something called a master plan community.
Okay.
And from a design perspective, Derick, that's a spin-off from the 50s when Bill Tarrant envisioned Kanata and created a village with a town and a city envisioned around living, working, and playing in one space. So the village of Beaverbrook, embedded in a naturalized community with trees and rocks and open space abounding, and a tech park that someday would mature.
Right.
And this is, in fact, what has happened. And along the way, yes, there was expansion and a desire for a golf course and open space. And Compo delivered that to the city of Kanata in the form of the 40% agreement. So an open recreation, naturalized space that was good for health, good for the community and the growth of families, and an environmental space. Of course, who could have foreseen how valuable the latter would become 50 or 60 years later? So this isn't happenstance. It's true design, and it truly was a community, I think, slightly ahead of its time. And today we're trying to protect it and keep it that way.
So there's going to be an appeal, right, to the decision to the Supreme Court. What is the timeline? I mean, I understand it's difficult to probably try to see what's possible, but what kind of timeline do you think we're looking at, Barbara?
Well, my understanding is the city is pursuing the consideration of that very action right now.
Right.
So yes, the city, again, we trip over the legalities here, Derick. The city and Clublink are the official parties to the 40% agreement.
Right.
The coalition
we got intervener status in the Superior Court last year. If the parties take it back to the Superior Court, as the Court of Appeal instructed them to do, by the way, the Court of Appeal was clear. If the parties cannot now resolve the meaning of the 40% agreement, they need to go back to the Court of Justice Labrosse for his opinion. I can assure the community the coalition will be there if it goes back to Justice Labrosse's court, for certain. The city believes, however, the Court of Appeal has erred and is considering an appeal to the Supreme Court. My understanding is that the Supreme Court hears less than 10% of the cases that seek leave to appear before it. Okay. So there's a small chance that it will get that leave, and it is, of course, a great challenge if they do. And those Supreme Court slots are often a year or more in the waiting.
Right.
But that's a city decision first at this point in time.
Barbara, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Derick, and thanks again for having me.
A pleasure. That's Barbara Ramsey, chair of the Kanata Greenspace Protection Coalition. Don't go away. Lots more coming up here on the Rob Snow Show. This is Derick Fage filling in for Rob right here on Rogers TV and City News.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 2nd of December. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, light rain, 5 degrees, light rain and 5 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. A cybersecurity breach at Rideau Hall. At this point, it's not clear if any sensitive information was compromised, nor is it clear who's behind this. The Governor General's office says immediate action was taken to strengthen the network. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is investigating, but won't discuss details of the breach. We're waiting for details on Ontario's third dose campaign for COVID-19 vaccines. The province's Chief Medical Officer of Health is expected to make an announcement later today for those 50 and older, and that is expected to come this afternoon. Ottawa Public Health starting pop-up after-school vaccination clinics for children to receive their COVID shots. The clinics will be held in the afternoons and will rotate from school to school. Ottawa City Council could start hybrid meetings in the new year, with some members in person and some online meeting together. The city clerk recommends council continue with virtual meetings for now and then decide in January, based on the COVID situation, whether they'll switch from virtual to hybrid for its late January council meeting. City News Time 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here filling in for Rob for the rest of the week. We are trying to get, by the way, in touch with Geoffrey York, Africa correspondent to the Globe and Mail. He is based in Johannesburg, to get an idea of what's happening on the ground level there in South Africa. David and I are going to discuss some of these issues as we try to get a hold of them, and we may talk a little bit of Sens hockey as well in this segment as we wait to get a hold of Geoffrey York. But you're seeing domestic vaccine hesitancy. It's certainly a contributing factor in the slowdown in South Africa. If you're going to ramp up the vaccination rate, that has to change. The president has announced that a task team has been established to undertake some broad consultations on making vaccination mandatory for specific activities and locations, something that I'm surprised hasn't been done already. As far as the numbers go, in South Africa, you have over 8,500 new COVID infections registered in the latest daily figures. That's almost double the 4,300 cases confirmed the previous day. And then cases increased from a weekly average of about 300 2 weeks ago to about 1,000 per day last week. And then on Wednesday, the country recorded 8,561 cases. The government there now, as I said, is considering vaccine mandates to try to control the spread. The rate of new infection expected to increase in what is now beginning to be a fourth wave in South Africa, and the National Health Department says there has also been a slight increase in hospital admissions. And as with previous variants, the full picture will not really become clear until people get so sick that they need to go to the hospital. So they don't know. I mean, we talked about it at the top of the show. They don't know what kind of situation they find themselves in with Omicron. They're still learning how, trying to figure out how serious it is. Most of the people who have been hospitalized in South Africa had not been vaccinated against coronavirus. No vaccine shortages in the country, by the way. President Ramaphosa has urged people to get jabbed because they say they don't have any issues with vaccine shortages, saying, this remains the best way to fight the virus. Only 36% of adults are now fully vaccinated in that area. So, definitely concerning situation. But again, mixed messaging. We talked about it off the top of the show. How serious is it? Scientists are saying, well, we're not so sure how serious it is. A lot of, media reports, of course, coming out and saying a few days ago that it's more contagious, David, than the other variants. But now they're not sure the severity of the actual illness itself with this particular variant.
Look, so there's basically three things we need to consider when we're talking about a new variant, right? Let's bring it back down to the
basics. Break it down for us, David.
I'm not an expert, but
I know. But we're consulting experts. In the facts that we are sharing here.
There's three things you want to look at: transmissibility, effect on vaccines, and severity of illness.
Right.
Transmissibility is probably where I think, as an observer, we have the most evidence so far to make comments on what may happen globally with this new variant. In South Africa, these are facts. These are things we know so far. Health officials in South Africa say the Omicron variant is now the dominant strain. This is the dominant strain. Most people with being infected with COVID-19 in South Africa have this strain. They have gone from a few hundred cases to almost 9,000 in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So what does that suggest about transmissibility? Again, I am not an infectious disease expert, but I think that it's not inappropriate to say you can probably draw a line between those two things and say this, if it's not more infectious, it's at least as infectious. I don't know. I don't think that it would be logical to assume it's less infectious, but I'm open to being corrected on that. These are just the facts that we have to work with at right now, and that's the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and what we also found out is it didn't start in South Africa. I mean, this is the situation that's going to be the constant in this, because information slowly comes in as these things. I mean, now we think it started in the Netherlands. Quite frankly, next week we may find out it started somewhere else.
And
right?
It doesn't really matter where it started, because the evidence now is that there's community spread in Europe and there's community spread in Africa. And if there's community spread on two continents, it's very likely there's going to be community spread elsewhere. Yesterday, we found out in the United States they're now investigating cases not related to each other, but in multiple states.
Right.
And the U.S. has brought in new travel measures in an attempt to curb that. We're now being told that traveling is the transportation minister yesterday, Omar Al-Ghabra, in this country, the Trudeau Liberal transportation minister, said at a press conference he doesn't think it's wise to travel right now.
And especially if you're over 60.
Especially,
right?
Well, if you're over 60, you're being told not to travel at all.
To zero travel.
But what Al-Ghabra said yesterday during his press conference, which I picked up on because I was stuck in a situation which a lot of people are in now when the pandemic first started in February 2020. I was in the United States when the pandemic first started.
Okay.
So at that time, what I was doing was watching very closely what the then Foreign Affairs Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, was saying day to day in the media, because I was looking for him to telegraph whether or not they were going to close the borders to the country. Because we thought at that point that locking Canadian citizens out of the country may have been on the table. That's not on the table this time around. But what Al-Ghabra said in his press conference yesterday, which I think people should take note of, is his advice to people who are planning to travel is that these travel measures can change at any time.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Yeah. These travel measures can change at any time.
I mean, you should be worried. If you've planned something, over the holidays or just after the holidays, a lot of people plan for January, February. I mean, I don't want to scare anybody. That's not a tactic I use. I don't sensationalize anything, but if I had planned a trip, I would certainly be worried. And that this is another thing that stood out to me about the situation in South Africa is that there's no consideration in implementing new social restrictions. Like, public gatherings are restricted to, guess what, 750 people indoors and 2,000 outdoors. They have a curfew in place between midnight and 4 a.m., but that's it as far as their restrictions go. So no vaccine mandate and no consideration in implementing new social restrictions. I find that fairly surprising, especially with the rate of infection that they have at the moment.
So what does it mean for us? Well, realistically speaking, it means you may want to rethink your travel plans. I don't think it would be imprudent to think about your travel plans and consider whether or not you're going to wind up in a situation that you don't want to be in, either being stuck having to quarantine when you get back or paying out of pocket for testing. And then another note on the testing requirements that have been brought in by the Liberal government in the past few days. On Tuesday, we got the initial announcement. They came directly out of a cabinet meeting and put the ministers up to do a press conference. So naturally, at that point, there were some specific questions that they weren't able to answer.
Right.
And they said more information is coming, and 24 hours passed. And then yesterday, some of these ministers were asked again about some of the questions. And my understanding, unless things have changed this morning, which I don't believe that they are, is that here are some of the things that the federal government has yet to nail down about their own measures, let alone measures in other countries. Testing happens at the airport, except when it doesn't. Yves Duclos, the health minister yesterday, said there are circumstances in which there may be a take-home option. Why would there be a take-home option? He didn't have an answer to that.
Right.
You get tested at the airport, and then you go immediately into isolation, except for the point in time where you're traveling from the airport to wherever you're going to be in isolation. How do you get home from the airport? Are you taking public transit? If you do take public transit...
There's no way you can take public transit.
Is that going to
I guess if that's your only option.
Are you putting people at danger? We had no answer from that the last time the health minister was asked about it. Who pays for the test? Who pays for the quarantine hotel? Minister Al-Ghabra said he thought it was probably going to be the government.
I love that.
But they hadn't nailed that down yet.
Hold on. So they're going to take the responsibility of paying for the hotel room out of the hands of individuals, and they may pay for it themselves?
This is what happened the last time. it's hard to remember now with the whenever it was that at the last point in time when travelers incoming to the country had to stay in quarantine hotels, the government was covering the cost of that. And we talked about it a lot at the time because it was an exorbitant cost. I think
it was ridiculous.
I think it was $4,000 for 3 days.
It was like absolutely, it made no sense.
They got into trouble for that at the time, and now they're being a little bit cagey about
did that come with room service?
We're picking up the tab. And we also know from that point in time all the reports of how it's not fun to stay in those hotels. You may not get meals delivered at appropriate meal times. You're not allowed to go outside. So...
yeah, and hotels should be fun, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of staying in a hotel. At least, a little room. You lost my joke there, David. I said, does it include room service? It better. You better have a bottle of sparkling in your room and some bonbons on your pillow if it's $4,000 for a 3-night stay.
They serve you like prison food.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's worse than hospital food.
Okay, David, I'm going to switch gears here.
Why?
Just because we've got a couple of minutes left.
You got to get your rant on the Sens.
All
right, go for it.
So this is what November, by the way, everybody, looked like for the Ottawa Senators. Their record was 1-10-1. 1-10-1. Okay. The high hopes that we had with that great run at the end of last year where they won a number of games to wrap up the season, everybody's feeling great about themselves. This is absolutely unbelievable, this downward spiral. I mean, last night they lost 6-2 to a terrible Vancouver Canucks team. Their late season surge of last year is completely gone. We have not heard from Pierre Dorion. We have not heard from Pierre McGuire, by the way, who is hired in part, of course, for his knowledge of NHL players playing in the NHL. Right, our amateur scouting is very good. I say the Ottawa Senators amateur scouting is quite good, but their professional scouting is abysmal. I mean, nothing has worked out. Any signing that they have made to try to put some veterans around this young core is an absolute disaster. So somebody has to say something. I mean, my fear right now, and I was talking to David about it, and I was talking to my producer over at Rogers TV about it as well. My fear right now, and Ian Mendez writes about this in his column in The Athletic, is Eugene Melnyk. This is like prime Eugene Melnyk, go on Toronto radio and discuss what's happening and tell us all what this team needs, and then not actually get those teams. Because I don't know if you remember, before this, during the offseason, we needed a number one center and a top four defenseman. We got neither of those things.
Neither of them.
And then I like DJ Smith. He's a good person. I mean, he was a decent coach to work with these young players. I think he connects with young players. But the structure of this team defensively, you cannot blame it on goaltending alone. Because if you watched any of that game last night, and I don't even care, you don't even have to watch the whole game. If you watched 10 minutes of that game last night and saw the worst defensive structure, they can't get the puck out of their own zone. They have no outlet passes available. I mean, the forwards have to take some responsibility too. But outside of Shabbat and Zub, we've seen some encouraging things from Lassie Thompson, but he shouldn't be up there playing anyway. The rest of that defensive core, David, I mean, they're not even starting in the bottom six of another NHL team right now.
I would completely agree with you on that. Some of the goals and the replays that I've seen from that game and in the couple of games preceding it are not NHL caliber hockey players. They're just not. They're just not professional caliber. So I have to ask you, though, who takes the fall for it? Is it DJ? Is it the defensive coach? Who is it?
Well, I think DJ. I mean, he's the coach, and if your defensive coach isn't structuring your team the way that you think it should be, DJ Smith is known for his defensive coaching, is his X's and O's. I mean, that's what he was known for.
He was a defenseman,
coming
wasn't
in,
he,
exactly, coming into the league as well. Okay. As a head coach, I should say. So, no, I think he's got to take some of the blame, but somebody's got... I don't know if you saw this, but in the third period, they showed some video of... it was Pierre McGuire, the assistant GM, and I forget who the other gentleman was, but they were sort of... and this is during practice, And the three of them were together, and then Pierre Dorion was separate, sitting in the stands separate. And, of course, all the rumors started, what's going on? Is there a spat between these two? I mean, anything could have happened, right? Pierre could have been preparing for a call to come in, and he didn't necessarily want to be with the rest of his team to take this call. I mean, who knows? But somebody, Pierre McGuire is hired, of course, as I was saying, supposedly for his acumen when it comes to professional hockey players and helping to scout and bringing in some players. But he was also hired to speak on behalf of this team, right? He was supposed to be the guy to go in front of the media.
Yeah, where are you, Pierre?
So DJ Smith is taking all the heat, and then Gaudette, who's playing his first game last night, he has a press conference. This poor kid, his first game with his new team, and they're asking these questions that he shouldn't have to answer. I mean, it just didn't make any sense to me. Pierre Dorion or Pierre McGuire, somebody has to say something and help out DJ Smith at this point, or just fire the guy and let's move on.
Agreed. They need a new messaging campaign. They need a head to roll. Something needs to change, and soon, like next couple of days soon.
Oh, yeah. Listen, everyone's on the Shane Wright. They're looking. I mean, people are going through. I know people that are looking at the top 5 prospects right now instead of following the Sens on the ice. They're like, okay, who can we get? If we don't get Shane Wright, what are the other centers we can get? Okay,
the disease of the mind that is being a Sens fan.
Oh my goodness, we've had enough pain, people. Okay,
we gotta wrap this up.
Yeah, we're out of time here.
There's more on the show to go.
Of course, we're going to talk to Lisa Levin, CEO of Advantage Ontario. A big announcement from the Ontario government. We'll go through that when it comes to long-term care. And they're calling this a game changer for not-for-profit homes, Advantage Ontario says. So we'll catch up with Lisa after this. This is Derick Fage filling in for Rob Snow on Rogers TV and City News.
Was devastating, and it's devastating to all small business, but not knowing where it was going to go. But then the renovation market, as people stayed home, took off like wildfire. And for us, yes, we're very lucky, very fortunate that we were able to turn things around. I think a lot of it had to do with our internet presence as well, that I was, kept working on over years, and then it kind of took off. So that was very positive. But now, no, people are staying at home. We're renovating different markets, whether it's a kitchen or a backyard or, your fireplace. They want to cozy things up. So yes, things are extremely busy right now. Right now it's fireplaces, and I think with the snowbirds, a lot of those clients have existing wood fireplaces, so they're looking at inserts. So they want to convert the wood to gas. They don't want to deal with the wood part of it, but they want it clean and easy and efficient, and that's been a major, major increase in our business. The cottage and chalet market has really increased, absolutely. We see that people, that's their staycation now, is either the backyard or their cottage with their close bubble of family. So there's no question that we've seen a big, big increase in that area as well. I've seen a change in the backyard because now the staycation, from my past being in the pool business, one of our great clients was in the other day, and he's in the pool business. He's booking for 2022. For in-ground pools, okay? So I think what's happened now is that's brought everybody back home, and I think maybe down the road, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're still gonna see people spending time in their backyards and staying home more. The barbecue area, really, we call it the backyard. So you walk out of your house into a backyard, and it kind of looks like that with the fencing and the sky and things like that. So that is just our fun room. It's just, there's a lot of cool gadgets there that has to do with dealing with charcoal and wood pellet barbecues. To go online, you're going to find, you just Google, romantic fireplaces will come up. The one nice thing about our work is that when the Google reviews and the Google pictures are phenomenal. We're uploading stuff every day. I have at least 1,000 jobs, real jobs that you can take a look at, either on the Google pictures on the drive, or if you go to our website at romanticfireplaces.com and click on our work. It's where we used to load lots of them up. but there's lots of pictures there too. But the great thing about that is they're real. There's testimonials there about people talking about our team. And our team here is unique to everybody else. It's two small teams, but these fellas work for me. They're our guys. So when they go into your home, they care as much about your house as you do.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derick Fage here, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in for Rob, and the big announcement. The Ontario government is now providing loan guarantees to make it easier for select not-for-profit homes to secure development loans from Infrastructure Ontario. Here to tell us why this is such a game changer, I'm joined by Lisa Levin, CEO of Advantage Ontario. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, good afternoon or good morning or whatever it is. I'm so excited. I don't even know what time it is.
That's okay. I'm the same, not to worry. Heck, yesterday I'm doing so many shows these days, I forgot what show I was on. I had one of those awkward pauses on radio. You're listening to, yes, City News Ottawa. That's right. That's where I am. Filling in for Rob Snow. So let's talk about this and why it's such a maybe first of all, you can break down exactly what this is, this development loan.
So in order to build something, you need to get a loan unless you happen to have all that, millions of dollars just, lying around, which most people don't and most organizations do not.
Right.
And for-profit organizations have equity and investments, and municipalities have access to equity. But not-for-profit long-term care homes or groups, who are often grassroots community groups representing different cultural, religious, or charitable groups, do not typically have an easy time being able to finance the building of large long-term care homes that cost millions of dollars.
Right.
And so it's been a huge, huge barrier to being able to get these homes built. And now that barrier has been removed.
And is there still concern? Listen, this is still a government that you have to deal with. There's often a lot of red tape. Are you encouraged that this really does open up the door completely? Obviously, you're not just, we don't want the government just giving away money willy-nilly, but sometimes some of these programs can be very difficult to work your way around. Do you have any idea, Lisa, of the details of the program, and have you spoken to people in the field that have a little bit more understanding of it?
Well, firstly, we actually asked for this program.
Right.
So we don't know exactly how it's going to roll out. We're going to get a briefing soon. So I can't give you all of the details.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that it's not even really going to cost the government money. They're going to loan money that will be repaid to homes. And the Ministry of Long-Term Care will guarantee that. So Infrastructure Ontario needed that guarantee to be able to loan homes the money. And furthermore, homes are going to be able to save money because the interest rates will be better than if they went to a bank.
Right. Yeah, no, that...
So really, this is real. Like, this is, something that's mired in red tape. This is eliminating the red tape. A lot of homes have been held up because they've been trying to get these approvals from Infrastructure Ontario. And this is going to remove that red tape. And it won't be for every home. It says select homes, but it does say it's the inaugural round, which to me implies there will be more rounds. And
right.
that other homes in the future will be able to get this. So it is absolutely amazing.
Lisa, while I have you, what about long-term care homes? And, is there a sense of anxiety? We've talked about this new COVID-19 variant. Long-term care homes were hit very, very hard. And I know you've done, in that sector, you've done such a great job getting people vaccinated and protecting vulnerable seniors. What's the feeling like at the moment?
Well, everybody is on the one hand concerned about the new variant, and we're still all waiting to hear what it means. But if anything or any element of society is protected, it is long-term care. We have the personal protective equipment. We have the protocols in homes that are very, very strict in terms of screening. And so hopefully, and plus, the staff have been able to receive boosters as well as the residents.
Right.
So we're hoping that this will go by without any issue. But of course, we need to wait for science to catch up to the variant to see what it really does mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right. That's Lisa Levin, CEO of Advantage Ontario, and certainly a welcome announcement. That does it for the Rob Snow Show. I'm Derick Fage. I'll be back tomorrow between 9 a.m. and noon. But coming up after the break, don't go anywhere. Sam Laprade, the Sam Laprade Show coming up after this. You're listening to City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.